Hi everyone. Tonight, you step barefoot onto a shoreline so cold it almost crackles beneath you. You feel that first breath of Viking air enter your lungs like a thin edge of winter. You stand where early settlers once arrived, partly frozen, partly hopeful, facing a land that doesn't care whether you survive or become a human icicle. Realistically, if you arrived here in normal indoor clothing, survival would be unlikely. The wind cuts sharply, the frost stings, and every instinct tells you to find shelter before night takes over. Before settling in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this content. Also, share where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always interesting to see this quiet community spread across the world. Now dim the lights. You are here, surrounded by darkness and the scent of salt, walking along a rugged coastline where the Vikings first stepped onto unfamiliar land. Waves strike against frost-hardened rocks, and you follow their steady rhythm like a drum guiding your movement. This future settlement is empty and exposed. There are no chimneys, no welcoming fire, no warm meal waiting. Only a few thin birch trees, wind that hits your face like scattered sand, and the distant groaning sound of pack ice shifting offshore. At this point, no one knows exactly where to build, not even them. The only certainty is that they need a place where the land won't bury them in snow or flood during the spring thaw. The Vikings are widely known as skilled sailors, a familiar historical point. But here, that skill means little unless they can establish themselves somewhere that won't destroy them by winter. You move with them as they scan the land, speaking quietly, searching for any natural feature that could block the wind. A ridge, a group of shrubs, or even the curve of a hill. Your footing sinks into a mix of wet sand and early frost. Each step crunches underfoot, almost like a warning. You notice how they occasionally kneel, running their fingers through the soil, checking its moisture, even lifting it to smell it, as if it might reveal something hidden. In a way it does. Damp soil leads to colder floors. Rocky ground creates unstable foundations. A shallow layer of earth risks frost heave, the natural process that pushes structures upward and distorts them. Historians still debate whether early settlers fully understood frost heave or simply learned through experience as their first homes shifted and tilted. Either way, the frustration is easy to imagine. The wind moves across your ears, slipping beneath your clothing, and for a moment, you feel exactly what they feel, the urgent need for warmth. Shelter is not optional here. It is essential for survival. Instinctively, you tighten your posture, pull your chin down, and brace against the cold. They do the same, wrapping themselves in thick wool cloaks treated with lanolin to repel moisture, and continue moving inland. A small cultural detail appears in the moment. Some early Norse travelers believed certain coastal winds carried the moods of ancient spirits, and those spirits favored humility from newcomers. So if you find yourself quietly reacting to the cold, you are, in a way, following old traditions. Eventually, the settlers stop at a low rise covered with thin grass and hardy shrubs. You reach down and touch them, the leaves snap easily from dryness. Above, the sky holds a pale gray-blue tone of Scandinavian twilight, a light that lingers but provides no real warmth. You listen as the Vikings discuss the area in low voices, pointing toward the hillside, a nearby stream, and the protective shape of a natural dip in the land. They are searching for balance, enough drainage to prevent mud, enough open space to build long structures, and enough protection from the wind to survive the first winter. You take a breath. The air is sharp with pine, salt, and damp wool. When you exhale, it turns instantly to mist. You imagine what it means to have only a few months, maybe less, to prepare for one of the harshest winters possible. You can sense their urgency increasing. It's a familiar feeling, the realization that what you build must be strong, warm, and carefully planned, because it stands between you and a cold that can take your breath in seconds. You move forward with them as they test the ground using spear shafts and their boots. One person gathers soil and crushes it between his fingers. Another leans down and presses his ear to the ground. It may seem unusual, perhaps even superstitious, but he could be listening for underground water. It's unclear even to him, but the others nod in quiet agreement, so you accept it as part of the process. The longer you remain here, the more you begin to see the outline of what will come. The Vikings are preparing to build a home, a place filled with warmth, smoke, and firelight that will protect them through months of darkness and extreme cold. You will follow every stage of that process, not as a distant observer, but as someone experiencing it directly, feeling the wood, breathing the cold air, and hearing the steady rhythm of tools at work. For now, the focus is simple: choosing the right location. The wind shifts slightly, brushing against your face, and you instinctively pull your cloak tighter, mirroring their actions. You look at the trees, short, twisted, shaped by harsh weather, and consider how these will become strong enough to form reliable shelter. But they will manage. They have done this before, and they will do it again. As the sky deepens into a cold violet and the first stars appear, the settlers exchange silent agreement. This is the place. This is where warmth will be created, where families will rest, and where firelight will reflect off wood and earth. This is where their long effort to survive begins. The next morning, you wake with frost clinging to your eyelashes. The world is pale and still, broken only by the distant sound of an axe striking wood. The Vikings have already started, and you follow without delay. Your breath forms clouds in the air as you walk toward the tree line, where they are testing trunks with experienced hands, deciding which timber can protect them from months of intense cold. The sun remains low, offering little heat, but enough light to outline each tree, almost like reading an old script written across the forest. You place your hand on a birch trunk. Its bark feels thin and fragile, almost peeling at the touch, not suitable for retaining heat. The Vikings recognize this as well. They speak quietly, evaluating which types of wood can meet the demands of a structure that must be both strong and adaptable. A well-known historical point fits naturally here. Norse settlers often preferred pine and spruce for construction, not out of any romantic attachment to forests, but because these trees grew straight, split easily, and handled moisture better than most. Straight-grained wood meant fewer cracks, fewer drafts, and fewer long winter nights spent wondering why your toes felt like frozen turnips. You follow a small group as they move deeper into the forest. The trees creak softly in the wind, each sound carrying a quiet sense of caution. You observe as they do, noting how a trunk leans and listening to how branches shift. Is the tree dry inside or waterlogged? Has the wind shaped it into a curve that might weaken a house frame? Historians still debate whether Vikings selected timber with precise engineering knowledge or relied mainly on intuition built over generations. It seems likely to be a mix of both, as you watch these settlers tilt their heads, narrow their eyes, exchange quiet words, and occasionally tap a trunk as if politely asking if it is suitable. A small moment stands out when a young builder taps a tree with the base of his axe and seriously claims it sounds grumpy and should be avoided. The others react with mild amusement but leave the tree untouched. Perhaps he is joking, or perhaps it reflects a hint of superstition. In the stillness of a Scandinavian forest, even you begin to wonder if some trees are better left standing. You start to notice a steady rhythm forming in the work. One person marks trunks with small cuts near the base, while another collects fallen branches for kindling. You pick up a handful of pine needles, crush them between your fingers, and inhale their sharp, resinous scent. It tingles slightly, offering a small comfort against the cold. The Vikings also pause at times to smell the air, not for poetic reasons, but because sap-rich wood burns hotter, lasts longer, and bends more easily without breaking. The first tree falls with a deep cracking sound that echoes through the forest. You feel the vibration in your chest as it travels beneath your feet. Snow drifts down from nearby branches, shaken loose by the impact. Once the trunk settles, the Vikings immediately begin removing branches, smoothing knots, and measuring sections. Their tools cut into the wood with steady, scraping strokes, producing a sound that feels oddly reassuring. You kneel nearby, studying the tools. They are simple, yet highly effective. The broad axe makes clean cuts, while the adze shapes the surface with controlled scooping motions. Each strike sends wood chips into the air, and every curling shaving releases a warm, earthy scent that feels almost comforting despite the freezing air. You catch one shaving in your glove, noticing how it curls like a ribbon and gives off a faint warmth. You follow as they drag the logs toward the settlement. The effort is slow and heavy, yet consistent. Boots crunch over frost, breaths grow heavier, and occasional jokes pass between them, brief moments of humor that help ease the strain of the cold. Walking alongside them, you imagine how your own shoulders would ache if you were pulling timber uphill. As you approach the clearing selected earlier, the space feels more open and purposeful, as though the land itself is ready to support what will be built here. You stand with them at the edge, looking at the logs now stacked neatly like resting giants. Frost patterns on the bark catch the light, resembling faint markings drawn overnight. You reach out and touch one, feeling the sharp cold against your fingers. Despite the chill, there is something steadying about connecting with the materials that will soon hold firelight, conversation, and quiet winter nights. The Vikings discuss how many trunks are needed, their thickness, and whether to split them or keep them whole. They gesture toward the ground, sketching rough layouts with their boots. You notice that the selected trees are not especially large. In many areas of Scandinavia, tall timber was limited, so settlers relied on shorter, narrower logs. This required more joints, more planning, and careful positioning. While challenging, it also offered advantages. Smaller logs dried faster, were easier to handle, and could still retain heat effectively when arranged with precision. As work continues, the importance of each decision becomes clear. The angle of a cut determines how tightly logs fit together. The wood type influences how well heat remains inside during extreme cold. Even the grain direction affects how sound moves through the walls. You place your hand on a freshly cut log, feeling a slight warmth still present, and imagine future winter nights when families will gather by the hearth, protected by these strong, silent beams. The wind shifts again, colder this time, brushing against your ears. One builder notices your reaction and gives a knowing look, as if to suggest you will adapt. The Vikings already have. They continue working, cutting, shaping, carrying, while hours pass in a steady flow. Gradually, the clearing fills with timber ready to form walls, roofs, and supports. Looking around, you realize the forest is already beginning to take the shape of a home. Each selected tree represents a commitment. Every cut brings them closer to warmth. Even decisions influenced by small traditions or beliefs contribute to their progress. The environment feels active with effort, and despite the cold, you sense a growing warmth within. As the light begins to fade, you look toward the horizon and picture the longhouse taking form: solid walls, a secure roof, and a glowing hearth. For now, you remain among the stacked logs, surrounded by the scent of fresh pine and the quiet confidence that the Vikings understand exactly how to prepare for the harsh winters ahead. Later, you return to the clearing, your steps marked by the crisp sound of frost beneath your feet. This time, you watch as the Vikings begin shaping an unexpected building material: the earth itself. At first glance, sod appears to be nothing more than uneven clumps of grass and soil, something easily overlooked. Yet in this severe climate, it becomes essential. You kneel and run your fingers along a freshly cut slab. It feels heavy, damp, and compact, similar to a natural brick held together by roots. The Vikings carefully lift each piece, stacking them beside the timber that will form the structure of the longhouse. You observe how the roots bind everything together, forming a strong, natural network. It may seem surprising that grass could provide insulation, but the air trapped within soil and roots makes these blocks highly effective at retaining heat. This is why turf houses appear across cold regions such as Iceland and Greenland. They offer reliable warmth using limited resources. You continue watching as more sod is cut with long-handled spades. The blades slide beneath the surface with a soft scraping sound, lifting each section like a thick layer of carpet. When the slabs are turned over, the underside shows layers of soil that act as natural insulation. The scent rises at once: damp earth, decaying leaves, and wet minerals. It feels strangely comforting, like the smell inside a greenhouse after rain. You lift a piece yourself and notice its weight. It becomes clear why the Vikings used it. Heavy materials remain stable when winter storms try to pull everything apart. A well-known detail among students of Norse culture is that turf houses appear repeatedly in cold regions, from Iceland to Greenland, because few other materials retain heat as effectively with such limited resources. In early Norse settlements, elders often guided building decisions, even when their reasoning seemed unclear to younger people. One interesting detail preserved in certain sagas mentions families cutting turf only from northern slopes, believing that roots growing against the wind made the blocks stronger. Whether or not this belief had any scientific basis, it formed a tradition that influenced the design of many early winter homes. You follow the group as they carry sod toward the site. Each slab lands with a dull thud, forming tidy stacks. They speak quietly, discussing wall thickness. Some suggest a single layer, while others argue for 2 or even 3. You catch parts of their debate, firm but controlled. Their breath turns to fog between sentences, rising like pale smoke. Modern researchers still disagree on how thick Viking sod walls typically were, since surviving ruins vary widely. Some show walls nearly a meter thick, while others are much thinner. You imagine the settlers would find it amusing that people centuries later debate the thickness of dirt. The Vikings begin marking the first rough outline of the longhouse walls. Timber posts will support the structure, while sod fills the gaps, creating a dense insulating layer. You step closer as a slab is placed against a cut log. The texture surprises you, soft on the surface but firm beneath, like a cushion designed for cold climates. One man pats a slab and jokes that it is warmer than his cousin. It is unclear whether he means it as an insult or praise, but the others laugh and continue working. You assist in small ways, brushing loose soil from the slabs and clearing stones so the base sits level. As you work, the system begins to feel almost refined in its simplicity. The land provides exactly what is needed, layers of ready insulation. Instead of costly materials, they use what lies underfoot. Instead of fragile construction, they rely on weight and density. A sod wall does not aim to look impressive, it is built to endure. Heavy materials stay in place when winter storms attempt to tear everything apart. The more you handle the turf, the more its durability becomes clear. When you press your thumb into it, the soil gives slightly but holds together. Roots bind it tightly. Moisture remains inside without leaking. You imagine freezing winds striking these walls months later, only to slide off like dull blades against a shield. The turf is unaffected by wind or snow. It simply persists. As you pause to stretch, you look around the clearing. Stacks of logs grow higher. Piles of sod rise like earthen towers waiting to be placed. The outlines of future walls are becoming more visible. You can already sense the interior taking shape, a long, warm passage protected from the harsh cold. A space where firelight will reflect off wood and earth. One Viking approaches with a grin and tosses you a piece of turf. It lands heavily in your hands. He explains, half-jokingly, that a good turf block should feel like dense cake, not too dry, not too wet, but firm enough to stack without collapsing. You smile because the comparison works. It also shows that building here requires both skill and judgment. You stand near the growing line of marked posts, imagining how these slabs will soon be fitted between beams. Wood and earth together will form a strong barrier against winter. You picture snow piling against the walls, frost spreading across the roof, and inside, people resting peacefully under firs, unaware of the storm outside. Before dusk fully settles, you take a deep breath. The scent of soil lingers on your gloves, while the cold air brushes your neck. You realize you are standing at the beginning of a home not yet completed, but already full of purpose. This simple turf will become the quiet protection that helps people survive long, harsh nights. The next morning, you wake to a faint orange light spreading across the horizon, a sunrise so soft it feels like a whisper. The clearing has changed again. The timber stacks now appear more organized, arranged like ribs ready to form a structure. The sod remains in neat piles, still damp, its earthy smell present in the cold air. At the center, the Vikings begin outlining the curves and edges of what will soon be their longhouse. You step forward, hearing the crunch of frozen ground beneath your feet. As you look at the faint markings, the scale becomes clear. Longhouses are named for a reason. Even in simple form, they stretch across the land like inverted ships. You run your fingers along the rough lines drawn in the soil. The shape is long and narrow, tapering slightly at the ends, a design that helps manage wind and prevent snow buildup. A commonly known detail about Norse life is that these buildings served several functions at once. Families lived here. Animals were sheltered here. Tools were stored here. Daily life centered around the warmth held within these walls. The longhouse was not just a structure, it was a complete living space. You straighten as the Vikings begin setting the first posts. Heavy logs strike the ground with solid force. Each one leans slightly inward, starting the curve of the future roof. You can already imagine how snow will slide off these angles instead of collecting on top. You place your hand on one post, feeling the cold bark through your glove. It stands steady, set into a hole dug with care, neither too deep nor too shallow. Every action here is precise, shaped by experience and necessity. A group gathers near the center, discussing measurements and spacing. Their voices remain calm and steady. The wind carries parts of their conversation, terms about joints, angles, and balance. One builder uses a stick to draw a rough frame in the frost, mapping out the structure with simple lines. Another person nods, taps the ground thoughtfully, and gestures toward the stacks of timber. In that moment, you begin to notice something that often surprises newcomers to Viking history. There were many variations of longhouse designs, each shaped by local conditions and needs. Some builders chose taller interiors to improve airflow. Others preferred shorter, sturdier structures that retained heat more effectively. Archaeologists still debate why some regions built longer houses while others kept them compact. There was no single standard design, only adaptation. You move toward the far edge of the clearing as the Vikings begin lifting the first crossbeams. The logs creak as they rise, ropes pulling tight under the weight while steady hands grip the wood with practiced skill. The cold makes every task more difficult. Ropes stiffen. Knots take longer to secure. You can sense the strain in their muscles and hear it in their breathing. Yet they continue with quiet confidence, the kind developed over generations spent shaping shelter in harsh environments. As you observe, one man pauses to adjust a wooden peg, tapping it firmly with the handle of his axe until it fits securely. He does not rush, and no one urges him to move faster. This careful pace is necessary. A poorly placed beam could distort the entire structure. A misaligned joint could allow drafts to enter, draining warmth during long winter nights. You rest your hand on the beam and feel the promise of warmth it represents. Even unfinished, the longhouse already offers a sense of protection. A young woman carrying a basket of wooden wedges walks past. You notice small sprigs of dried herbs tucked into her belt. She sets the basket down and hands wedges to the men securing the next posts. Some Old Norse accounts suggest that certain herbs were believed to bring luck to new homes. Whether or not this belief had practical value, it added a sense of ritual to the work. For this group, that ritual brings a quiet calm to the cold morning. You follow her as she returns to the opposite end of the structure, where more posts are being positioned. From here, you can clearly see how the longhouse will extend across the clearing. It will be spacious, not extravagant, but highly functional. A wide central hall will define the interior. Sleeping areas will line the sides. The hearth will sit near the center. Livestock will occupy the far end, their body heat rising into the shared space. This layout appears repeatedly in archaeological remains across the North Atlantic, making it one of the most recognizable features of Viking settlements. As the beams take shape, the longhouse begins to reveal its character. It leans into the wind rather than resisting it. It settles into the earth instead of rising above it. It conserves warmth the way a careful person conserves breath in freezing air. This is the strength of the design. It does not oppose the environment, it works with it. You crouch near the place where the central hearth will eventually be built. The ground is bare for now, but you can already imagine the glow of firelight filling the space, reflecting off wood and turf, warming those gathered nearby. You instinctively understand that this hearth will become both the physical and social center of the home. It is where conversations will take place, where stories will be shared, where children will stay close to the warmth, and where meals will cook through long winter hours. Behind you, the Vikings lift another beam into position. Their effort echoes softly through the surrounding trees, as if the forest itself is observing. You step back and notice how the upright posts now form a steady rhythm, like the ribs of a large structure slowly coming to life. The clearing feels different, less open, more enclosed. The outline of the longhouse draws attention inward, focusing on the life that will soon exist within it. One of the builders gestures for you to help steady a log while they adjust the next joint. You place your hands on the cold wood, feeling its rough surface against your palms. The log shifts slightly, then settles firmly into place with a solid thud. The man beside you nods in approval. A brief silence follows, carrying a shared understanding that every piece secured today brings future warmth closer. When you step back again, the structure feels real. The beams stand like a quiet promise. The walls will soon take form. The roof will soon provide shelter. This land, once defined by cold wind and frost, is no longer empty. It is becoming a home. You take a slow breath, the cold air sharp in your lungs, and realize that the transformation is already underway. With every log, every wedge, every careful measurement, the story deepens, drawing you further into a place where warmth will be created from wood, earth, and human effort. You remain near the center of the clearing as the frame continues to rise. It becomes clear that everything here points toward a single feature. Not the walls, not the roof, not the livestock area or sleeping platforms. It is the hearth that draws your attention, the future fire that will glow steadily beneath the winter sky. Even before it is built, its importance is clear, settling in your thoughts like embers forming in a bed of coals. You walk toward the open space where it will be constructed. Frost crunches under your boots as the Vikings gather stones from a nearby stream. They carry them in their arms, placing them carefully onto the frozen ground. Each stone is selected with care. Flat stones are used to create a stable base, while uneven ones are set aside. You kneel and run your fingers across a dark river stone. It is cold, smooth, and slightly damp. Once heated, it will hold warmth long after the fire fades. Researchers often emphasize that Viking hearths were not only used for cooking. They were essential for survival inside winter homes. They provided heat, light, and a reliable way to prepare food and boil water. Without a well-built hearth, even strong walls offered only limited protection. The Vikings begin arranging the stones into a loose circle, forming a shallow basin where the fire will burn. Their actions remain calm and precise. One man steps back, examining the shape carefully. Another adjusts a stone to keep it steady. A woman crouches to check airflow, ensuring the fire will burn efficiently. It becomes clear that the hearth is not placed randomly. It must be positioned so smoke can rise and escape, while still remaining close enough for people to gather around it. You inhale the cold air and imagine how this space will soon carry the scent of wood smoke, cooking food, and warm hides. Some historical accounts mention that in certain early settlements, people spread crushed shells or fine sand beneath the hearthstones to prevent sparks from spreading across the floor. Whether this practice was based on belief or practical reasoning remains uncertain. Even so, you watch one of the builders spread a thin layer of coarse gravel beneath the stones. It crunches softly as he smooths it with his palm. The others nod in quiet agreement, and you sense that this simple layer is part of a tradition passed from one village to another. The Vikings pause briefly to warm their hands on each other's shoulders, rubbing fingers stiffened by the cold. A steady sense of shared purpose fills the air. You notice how often they glance toward the sky. Clouds move slowly, thick enough to suggest colder nights ahead, yet thin enough to reveal patches of pale blue. They understand that winter will soon grow harsher. They know they must complete this hearth before temperatures fall further. For them, this is not just a task. It is a race against nature. You crouch again to study the stones as they are set in place. You can already picture the glow filling this shallow pit, flames rising with soft crackles. You can almost hear the faint snap of pine resin and the low murmurs of people gathering close to the warmth. The hearth will influence every part of daily life. Meals will be prepared here, tools dried, and wounds treated nearby. Quiet conversations during long, dark nights will drift into its warmth. Families will gather, share stories, and rest under blankets while snowstorms rage outside. One builder lifts a piece of driftwood to test its dryness. He snaps it and listens for the clean break. Then he nods and sets it aside for the first fire. It is widely understood among those who study northern cultures that Vikings had a strong knowledge of wood moisture, often exceeding that of many modern campers. They knew which woods burned hottest, which produced too much smoke, and how long different types needed to dry before use. Pine burns hot but quickly. Birch burns more steadily but releases a resinous smoke. Driftwood, although easy to find, can contain salt that damages iron tools. Every decision affects the warmth of the home. A small boy approaches the hearth area carrying a bundle of twigs. His face is red from the cold, but his eyes show excitement. He carefully places the twigs on the ground and steps back with pride. The adults gently pat his head and thank him. The gesture shows how central fire is to their lives. Even children understand its value. It is not a luxury. It is survival woven into their traditions and daily routines. As the longhouse frame rises around you, the hearth area feels like a central anchor. It stabilizes the entire structure. Although it has not yet been lit, you imagine how the rafters above will guide smoke toward a small vent. In some regions, people built stone chimneys. In others, they relied on simple roof openings, allowing smoke to drift out slowly while keeping most of the heat inside. There is still debate among archaeologists about how effective these systems were. Some suggest smoke lingered in the upper rafters, forming a warm, smoky layer that helped preserve meat hanging above. Others believe ventilation was more controlled and intentional. Standing here, you look up at the rising beams and can almost see the smoke gathering, curling, and finally escaping through a narrow opening in the roof. The Vikings begin building a low ring of stones around the edge of the hearth. This small circular barrier will keep burning logs in place and prevent embers from spreading across the packed earth floor. You run your hand along one of the stones, feeling tiny grains of ice melt under your touch. The surface is rough and solid. You imagine the many fires that will burn here, each flame reflecting off the same stone in shifting shades of orange and gold. The woman with the herbs returns, brushing snow from her sleeves. She scatters dried leaves into the gravel near the stones. A faint scent rises, warm and earthy, with hints of chamomile and something sharper that you cannot identify. She quietly murmurs a few words. Whether it is a blessing or simply a personal habit, you do not ask. You simply observe. In places where winter is severe enough to challenge even the strongest, people often combine practical work with small rituals. It makes the cold feel less harsh, less personal. At last, the group steps back to observe the circle they have formed. It is small, just large enough to boil water or cook food, yet it feels heavy with purpose. You look at it as well and pause for a moment. This is where warmth will begin. This is where stories will grow. This is where every night of winter survival will find its center. You kneel and place your hand on one of the stones. It is cold now. Soon it will become warm, then hot, eventually glowing as the fire performs its essential role. You can almost sense that future heat reaching into your bones. You close your eyes briefly and imagine sitting here on a stormy night, wrapped in wool, listening to the steady crackle of flames while snow builds against the walls outside. You imagine drifting into sleep to the quiet murmur of voices, the warmth holding winter back. When you stand again, the hearth is complete. It waits silently, a still center that will soon come alive. Later in the afternoon, you return to the longhouse frame. The sky is washed in a pale, icy blue that sharpens every outline. The posts stand firm. The beams stretch confidently above. And at the center, the hearthstones remain ready for their first spark. As you move through the growing structure, your gaze shifts upward, tracing the path smoke will soon follow. The Vikings gather near the roofline, discussing how to release smoke while preserving as much heat as possible. It is one of the most precise challenges in building a winter home, allowing the fire to breathe without letting the cold take away its warmth. You stand beneath a pair of rafters, imagining the path rising smoke will take. Without a vent, smoke would gather, coil, and eventually fill the longhouse until eyes burned and voices grew strained. If the opening is too large, valuable heat would escape into the sky. Somewhere between these extremes lies the balance they must achieve. You tilt your head back, watching as the builders carve a narrow opening near the peak of the frame. Wood shavings fall like fine snow, scattering across your clothing. One well-known detail among researchers of early northern homes is that smoke vents were often simple adjustable gaps in the roof. There were no tall chimneys or complex stone systems, just an opening that could be widened during cooking and reduced when the night became colder. You can imagine someone using a hooked stick to move a wooden flap, controlling airflow while the fire burned below. It is a simple but effective solution. The Vikings speak quietly among themselves about how wide the opening should be. One man gestures toward the rafters, arguing that a small vent will trap smoke and spoil the meat hung above for drying. Another disagrees, pointing out that winter winds could force their way through any large gap. Their voices rise and fall steadily. A similar discussion continues among modern researchers regarding how these vents were precisely managed. Some believe there were movable slats, while others suggest hanging skins pulled aside like curtains. Standing here and listening to the discussion, you realize that even the builders themselves shared this uncertainty. A young builder climbs the frame and begins securing a pair of wooden planks on either side of the opening. The planks are set at angles designed to deflect the wind. You can almost sense the airflow shifting around them, gently redirected so it enters softly rather than striking the house directly. You reach out and steady one of the support beams while he works. The wood feels cold beneath your palm, yet it is firm and unyielding. When the vent is complete, it appears deceptively simple, just a narrow line of open sky. Yet without it, the longhouse would struggle to function. As the builders step back to inspect their work, one woman kneels near the hearth to explain something to a younger worker. You move closer, listening carefully. She draws a line in the frost to demonstrate how heat rises in a column. Then she adds another line to represent drafts entering from low doorways. If the vent is placed directly above the hearth, smoke rises cleanly. If the opening is off-center, the smoke drifts sideways and spreads along the rafters. She taps her drawing with a stick, and the practicality of her explanation is clear. These people understand airflow with the same instinct others apply to fishing or farming. You walk through the interior, noticing how cool the air still feels. It will not remain that way for long. Once the hearth is lit and the vent begins to function, the entire space will change. The air will warm gradually, first settling into the stones, then the sod walls, and finally the heavy wooden beams above. The longhouse will begin to feel active. You pause beneath one of the high beams, letting your gaze follow the rising curve of the roof. A faint scent of resin lingers from freshly cut wood. You inhale deeply, taking in the sharp, clean smell, a reminder of the forest still present in the structure. Nearby, a small group discusses whether to hang a curtain of woven reed beneath the vent. Reed mats were sometimes used in early homes to help diffuse smoke while still allowing it to escape. You glance at the bundle of reeds resting against a log, their golden stems stiff and dry. If hung loosely, they would sway with the rising heat, allowing thin streams of smoke to pass through while reducing incoming gusts of wind. One man lifts the reeds, shakes them lightly, and nods in approval. That seems to settle the decision. You follow as he carries the bundle toward the center. He holds a few strands up to the light, checking their flexibility. If the reeds break too easily, they will not endure the winter. These, however, bend with a soft, quiet sound. He smiles slightly and hands them to a woman who begins weaving them into a simple panel. Her fingers move quickly, the reeds crossing in a steady rhythm that resembles fabric on a loom. She hums softly as she works, a tune that brings a sense of warmth despite the surrounding cold. When she hangs the finished mat near the vent, you notice how these small additions influence the quality of the air. As smoke rises, it brushes against the reeds, spreading into thin wisps before drifting out, preventing thick buildup inside. At the same time, wind attempting to enter is broken by the woven surface, softened before reaching the interior. The design feels almost delicate, yet it is made for durability. You step back and observe the growing complexity of this simple opening. Wood directs the wind. Reeds guide the smoke. Hide softens the draft. Together, they transform a narrow gap into a controlled airway. The longhouse begins to resemble a structure that operates with intention. For a moment, you imagine the home during deep winter. Snow gathers against the walls, muffling outside sound. Inside, the hearth glows steadily. Smoke rises in thin lines, moving through the warm air before collecting near the roof and gradually exiting through the vent. Each trace of smoke carries the scent of wood, food, and wool clothing. Children rest near the walls under blankets, while adults speak in low, steady voices. Above them, the vent continues its function, allowing the home to breathe without losing its warmth. As you look upward again, the sky beyond the opening has deepened into a darker shade of blue, nearing purple. Evening is approaching. The builders brush snow from their hands and step back, observing their completed work. The vent is finished. It is small, modest, and easy to overlook, yet it will determine how comfortable the longhouse remains during the coldest nights. Without it, the fire would not function properly. With it, the structure becomes a reliable shelter. You walk beneath the rafters once more, noticing the faint chill that still lingers. Soon, that chill will disappear. The vent will carry smoke upward while the hearth distributes warmth throughout the space. The longhouse will soon support its first night of use. As you leave the clearing and the sky darkens above, you can already imagine thin trails of smoke rising into the winter air, signaling that a home is now in place. You return to the longhouse at first light. Frost on the ground sparkles like crushed glass beneath your boots. The frame stands firmly, its timber structure reaching toward the pale morning sky. The hearth remains at the center, and the smoke vent above it appears like a narrow opening observing the outside world. However, before the structure can effectively retain warmth, it requires one more essential feature. You notice a group of builders gathering long, straight planks from the previous day's work. Their expressions are calm and focused, suggesting that this step is critical for ensuring comfort during harsh conditions. You move closer, running your gloved fingers along the timber. It feels cold, rough, and slightly damp from the night air. Soon, these planks will form the double-layered wall system that provides insulation. You observe as the builders position two sets of vertical timbers side by side, leaving a small gap between them. This space, though not visible in function, plays a crucial role. A well-recognized principle in early northern construction is the use of dual-layer walls, an outer layer to resist wind and an inner layer to retain heat. The gap between them may only measure a few inches, but it significantly improves insulation. The trapped air acts as a barrier, slowing heat loss and reducing the impact of cold winds. You lean in and run your hand along the inner plank, considering the warmth it will eventually hold. As the builders begin securing the boards, the steady sound of wooden mallets striking pegs fills the air. Each impact creates a consistent rhythm. The outer planks stand firm like protective shields, thick and strong. The inner planks curve slightly inward, forming a surface that will help contain and distribute heat more effectively, giving the room a soft sense of enclosure. You step between the two layers, noticing how narrow the gap feels. It is remarkable how such a simple air pocket becomes an effective insulation method. Yet here you are, standing inside what will soon act as a trap for warmth. One builder crouches beside you, tapping lightly on the wood with his knuckles. He listens carefully, nods, and adjusts the plank's position. You understand he is testing how tightly the boards fit, ensuring no openings remain where cold air could enter. He gestures for you to touch the plank's edge. As you do, you feel the smooth groove carved to connect perfectly with the next piece. The Vikings use tools that appear basic, but their craftsmanship is far from rough. As the wall continues to rise, you notice the builders occasionally pressing small tufts of dried moss into tight spaces. They push it in gently with their fingers. You tilt your head with curiosity, and one of the women smiles as she passes, explaining that moss works as an excellent draft blocker. In some older regions, people believed certain moss types also prevented spirits from entering through cracks at night. Whether or not that belief truly mattered, the use of moss remains practical. It expands when damp and shrinks when dry, naturally sealing tiny gaps. Another detail often noted by archaeologists is that Vikings sometimes lined their inner walls with woven mats or animal hides. These layers added extra heat retention, especially during the darkest and coldest months. As you watch a group bring out rolled hides from storage, You can already imagine how they will soften the wooden interior and help trap warmth like a thick covering around the home. The builders pause briefly to stretch, rolling their shoulders and rubbing their hands together to fight the cold. Their breath forms clouds in the air, drifting upward like faint mist. You shift slightly and lean against one of the inner beams, feeling its solid strength. Soon, these walls will support an entire family, protecting them from the freezing winds that sweep across the land each winter. You picture yourself sitting nearby during a storm, sensing warmth radiate through the wood while snow strikes the outer surface. You move around the exterior, observing the craftsmen attach the outer planks. They position them vertically so rain and melting snow can run downward instead of collecting. A few builders discuss whether to char the lower edges of the boards. Some traditions suggest lightly burning the wood helps repel insects and improves resistance to decay. The idea catches your attention. You pick up a small plank and imagine holding it above a flickering flame, feeling the heat against your fingers as the surface darkens and hardens. A thoughtful discussion begins among the group about whether to fill the space between the two wall layers or leave it empty. Some believe adding straw or wool fibers would improve insulation. Others argue that an open gap reduces moisture buildup. You listen as their opinions rise and fall. Even today, experts continue to debate this point. Some research supports clear air gaps, while other findings favor added materials. The Vikings appear equally divided. Eventually, they choose a balanced approach. Most of the cavity remains empty, but small bundles of insulating fibers are placed into corners where cold air is most likely to enter. You appreciate their flexibility. They are not fixed in one method but adapt based on practical experience. One man lifts a long wooden brace and fits it carefully into the wall. You hear the faint sound of wood pressing against wood. He steps back, checks the alignment, and secures it with a peg, producing a firm, sharp crack. You place your hand on the outer wall. It feels cold for now, but its strength is clear. You imagine snow pressing against it without success, and strong winds hitting the surface only to lose their force against the double-layered barrier. The builders add horizontal beams at intervals, forming a grid that strengthens the wall and helps it withstand heavy snow loads. You follow the beams with your eyes, tracing their pattern along the length of the longhouse. It resembles a large wooden framework, each piece supporting the others to hold warmth inside. Inside, the inner wall curves gently toward the hearth, guiding airflow in subtle ways you can almost sense. You imagine sitting there at night, letting your back absorb the lingering warmth even after the fire fades. For a moment, you close your eyes and picture the soft crackle of embers, quiet conversations, the movement of blankets, and the calm atmosphere of a winter evening within this shelter. A sudden gust of wind passes through the clearing, pulling at your cloak. Snowflakes scatter through the air, reflecting light like fine particles. The longhouse remains steady. Its double walls stand firm, ready to resist the cold. You smile slightly, recognizing the balance of simplicity and intelligence in its design. There are no complex machines or rare materials, only wood, moss, air, and thoughtful human effort. You remain as the daylight begins to fade. The walls grow higher with each passing hour. The structure now feels more enclosed. The air inside becomes still, while the outside world seems farther away. As you step through the doorway beam, you sense a subtle change. You are now inside something protective, something that already feels warm in purpose, even before a fire is lit. You glance back at the completed sections of double walls and feel a quiet appreciation. From a distance, they may appear simple, just layers of wood, but their function is significant. These walls protect. They carry the effort of every hand that built them and will hold the warmth of every fire within. Soon, the roof will cover them, sealing the longhouse like a wooden shell. For now, you stand between these layers of future warmth, listening to the steady progress of the structure around you. You step back into the longhouse as the builders shift their attention toward the far end. The walls continue rising steadily. The roof beams angle toward each other like joined supports, while the hearth remains at the center, waiting for use. Now, the Vikings focus on another essential element for surviving winter, the animals that will share this space. You take a breath of the cold air and follow them to the section set aside for livestock. The smell of hay reaches you, blending with the natural scent of earth and timber. The builders move with confidence, indicating the rear area of the longhouse. This space will serve as the byre, a sheltered section where cattle, goats, and sheep will stay during winter. You sense the importance of this arrangement as you step inside. Livestock are not only sources of food, they also provide warmth. Their body heat rises, gradually spreading into the human living areas with a steady and reliable effect. A detail often highlighted by historians of northern communities is that many longhouses included shared spaces for both animals and people, not out of sentiment. Though affection may have developed over time, it often began out of necessity. In a climate where temperatures could drop so low that even breath seemed to freeze, the body heat of a few cows could raise the temperature of a living space by several degrees. You run your hand along a newly placed dividing beam, imagining how that warmth will rise like a gentle tide each night. You watch as the Vikings begin leveling the floor on the animal side. Their boots crunch over uneven ground, pushing aside frost and loose stones. They smooth the surface with wooden rakes, spreading a thick layer of straw. The straw crackles softly beneath their hands, releasing a warm, dry scent that softens the cold air. You crouch down and gather a handful. The fibers feel strong, each strand carrying the faint smell of long-past summer fields. A few younger workers bring bundles of reeds from the riverbank. They tie them together into simple mats that will line the partitions. You tilt your head with curiosity, and one of the older women explains with a smile that these mats absorb moisture and reduce drafts. She drapes the reeds along a post, spreading them carefully with her fingers. They rustle softly, like dry leaves moving in a gentle breeze. As you observe, a young man points to the dividing beam and begins discussing how high it should be. Some argue that a taller barrier keeps animals from wandering into the living space. Others believe a lower one allows better airflow. Sides form quickly, with light teasing and playful remarks, and soon a small debate begins. This same question appears in archaeological findings as well. Some ruins reveal tall partitions strong enough to lean against, while others show much lower barriers, almost like benches dividing the spaces. There is no single answer, only variations shaped by region and preference. Eventually, the builders agree on a waist-high partition. It feels solid under your hand, yet open enough to let warm air pass through. You can imagine the animals settling here, their steady breathing creating a calm rhythm. One of the men pats the beam and quietly jokes that cows make better housemates than some relatives. The group laughs, and for a moment the cold feels less intense. You step to the edge of the living area and look over the partition. The space feels wide and welcoming. The floor slopes slightly toward a shallow trench running along the edge. You kneel and trace it with your fingertips. It provides simple drainage for the byre, guiding liquid waste out of the structure. This small but important design detail appears repeatedly in excavated longhouse sites. It is practical, modest, and highly effective. The Vikings then bring in small wooden racks. They place them near the byre wall, securing them with pegs. These racks will hold winter hay, keeping it dry and within reach. You can almost hear the soft chewing of livestock in your mind, a steady, comforting sound during nights when storms shake the roof and icy winds slip through the smallest cracks. A child wanders into the byre space, dragging a piece of wool cloth behind him. He waves it like a flag and proudly declares that the cows will be honored guests. His mother laughs, lifts him up, and brushes straw from his hair. You smile, imagining how much warmth children must have felt lying near the hearth while animals rested at the far end, their breath rising into the rafters, mixing with smoke and soft light. You run your hands along the beams again as the Vikings begin reinforcing the byre walls. Thick wood meets dense sod. The textures feel firm, steady, and alive. You imagine how, once winter fully arrives, the animals will gather here, their bodies close together, their heat slowly spreading outward. It will warm the floors, warm the air, and rise into the human living area like an unseen fire. One of the older men taps the partition and shares a brief, slightly amusing story about a goat that once escaped during a storm. It spent the entire night sleeping on someone's bed, warming itself by the fire. The memory makes you smile, reminding you that life in these longhouses was not only about survival, but also filled with small moments of humor and unexpected companionship. As the byre takes shape, you begin to understand a deeper truth about Viking homes. They are not cold, rigid shelters built against nature. They are living systems, carefully designed to capture every possible source of warmth. Stone, turf, wood, fire, human bodies, and animals all work together. You step back and let the scene settle around you. The straw-covered floor, the sturdy partitions, the faint sweet scent of dried reeds, and the calm, focused voices of people building their future. You imagine the longhouse in the middle of winter, children curled near the hearth, adults weaving or carving by firelight, animals shifting quietly behind the partition, snow piling up outside, and wind pressing against the walls. Inside, the warm breath of humans and animals blends together, forming a protective cocoon of life in a frozen world. The byre is complete enough now to picture clearly. You place your palm on the partition one last time. The wood is cold for now, but soon it will hold the warmth of many living bodies. You turn toward the rest of the longhouse, breathing in the crisp air, and realize something simple yet meaningful. This home is not built for people alone. It is built for the entire living community that makes survival through winter possible. As the Vikings gather their tools and prepare for the next task, you feel a quiet warmth within yourself. A warmth that does not come from fire, but from understanding. You rise with the pale morning light filtering through the unfinished rafters. As you step into the longhouse, you sense a shift in the builder's rhythm. The walls stand firm now, the byre feels ready to receive animals, and the air carries the scent of fresh timber. Today, however, the Vikings focus their attention downward. You watch as they kneel on the cold earth floor, touching it with their fingertips as if checking a pulse. The ground is frozen, hard in some places, softer in others. At this moment, this uneven, icy floor is the true challenge. If the floor remains cold, everything else will follow. You take a careful step forward and crouch beside them, brushing your hand across the packed soil. It feels solid, almost like iron. You imagine sleeping above it during winter, wrapped in wool yet still feeling the cold rise into your bones. In that moment, you clearly understand why the Vikings developed clever methods to turn frozen ground into a gentle source of heat. Several of them begin carrying baskets filled with smooth river stones from a nearby stream. Each stone is rounded, heavy, and cold enough to sting your fingers. They pile them near the center of the longhouse, close to where the hearth will be. One of the women gestures toward the stones with quiet pride and explains that once heated, they can hold warmth for hours, sometimes even through the night. It is a simple idea, yet its effectiveness becomes clear immediately. A detail often noted by archaeologists studying northern dwellings is that Vikings sometimes buried heated stones beneath layers of sand or packed earth, creating a lasting and reliable source of warmth. You watch as the builders create a simple but effective thermal floor. They dig shallow pits in key areas, forming spaces where stones will rest. The pits aren't deep, but they are wide enough to hold the stones in a deliberate pattern. Each stone touches the next, allowing heat to pass along them quietly. The idea is simple, yet its brilliance is clear. You imagine families sitting cross-legged on winter nights, toes warm despite the storm outside. A few young workers carry wooden trays of coarse sand into the longhouse. The sand pours like gritty gold, spilling onto the floor with a soft hiss. They spread it evenly, leveling low spots and smoothing rough patches. You kneel and take a handful. Cold and granular, it feels surprisingly clean, almost soft. Sand regulates moisture, keeps mud at bay, and adds a bit of insulation. You move your fingers through it, noticing the subtle warmth of friction between the grains. As the pits take shape, cold stones are placed inside to test the arrangement. The stones bump gently against each other. You help adjust a few, hands brushing against damp soil. The builders ensure the stones fit snugly, resisting movement even when people walk above. Some old accounts note that certain settlements used flat slabs of shale or slate as radiant floor panels. These stones heated quickly and stayed warm for hours. Whether this was widespread is unclear, Some experts see it as regional. Still, as a group unloads a few thin, flat stones from a sled, you realize this longhouse will combine multiple methods for warmth. The builders place the flat stones in a corner near the living area, tapping them into place with mallets. Each strike sends a solid, deep note through the air. The stones fit together like puzzle pieces, forming a smooth surface ready to absorb heat from the fire. You touch one, its coldness hinting at the comfort it will soon provide. Gradually, the floor begins to transform. Pits take shape. Sand spreads evenly. Hard earth softens into something welcoming. Standing in the center of the longhouse, you notice a subtle shift. Attention has moved from vertical height to horizontal warmth. A woman with braided hair kneels by one pit, placing her palm on a stone. She tells of her grandmother, who believed heated stones held spirits. According to her, stones carried memories, warmed them, and they shared a quiet presence with the home. Whether a cautionary tale for children or a deeper idea, the story carries tenderness. Once the pits are set and stones arranged, the builders cover them with a mix of sand and dirt. This layer traps heat, releasing it slowly across the floor. You scoop soil onto the stones, feeling the grains slip between your fingers. Even in the cold morning air, the faint smell of earth feels hopeful. The builders check each section with their palms, making sure the floor is even. They take pride in this unseen work. It won't be visible when the house is complete, but every night, it will radiate warmth, like embers glowing quietly. An older man explains that floors like this ease the shock of stepping out of bed. In a world where wind cuts like a blade, small comforts matter. You imagine waking to smoke in the air, snow falling silently outside, and warmth rising from the floor beneath your feet, a luxury created from simple materials and careful hands. A debate begins about placing woven mats over the finished floor. Some argue mats add softness and trap heat, others caution they hold moisture and need attention. Archaeology reflects this same question. Some sites show mats, others show bare, polished earth. In the end, a compromise is reached. Mats go only under sleeping platforms. You move toward the hearth, where the floor's balance is crucial. Too much insulation and the fire struggles. Too little, and heat disappears into the ground. Builders shape the soil carefully, smoothing it in long strokes. You press your palm to the floor, feeling the faint promise of future warmth. Standing slowly, the cold air brushes your cheeks. The longhouse feels different now. Walls provide strength. Roof beams promise shelter. And the floor offers quiet warmth rising from below. It is more than a surface to walk on, it is part of the home's heartbeat. Your boots sink slightly into the fresh soil as you take a step. Soon, fire will heat the stones. Soon, families will sit wrapped in blankets, comfort rising from beneath, even as snow piles outside. You return later in the afternoon. The floor has settled into shape. The longhouse is ready for winter guests, double walls standing like guardians. Cold air reminds you, without proper clothing, even this warmth would not suffice. Today, the focus shifts from beams and joints to wool, fur, and layering, the intimate craft of surviving winter. You lower yourself onto a smooth section of floor, running fingers across a woolen cloak a woman set aside. Coarse at first touch, pressing deeper reveals density, warmth, and a slight softness from the lanolin in the fibers. This fabric, not walls or floors, clings closest to the skin in winter. Viking life studies confirm it. Wool was the true lifeline of the north. The wool came from sheep hardy enough to graze on windswept hills, and this fiber was transformed into textiles that retained warmth even when wet. You observe a group of women pulling long strands of wool from baskets, teasing them into soft, airy clumps. Their hands move with practiced skill, separating fibers in gentle, almost meditative motions. A young woman sits beside you and offers a few tufts of raw wool. You roll them between your fingers. Tiny bits of grass cling to the fibers, and the scent is faintly earthy, reminiscent of rain on a hillside. She smiles and demonstrates how to draw the wool into a thin line, twisting it slightly as it begins to take shape. You try to replicate the motion. Your line is uneven, but she nods encouragingly. You watch as she spins the fibers into strong yarn, the spindle turning softly in her hands. The rhythm is hypnotic, unexpectedly calming. Nearby, another woman kneels with a fur pelt over her lap, brushing its strands and checking thickness. You run a hand across the fur. It is warm instantly, wrapping your fingers in comforting heat. She explains that furs line boots, cloaks, and sleeping platforms, serving as the first defense against bitter wind. The Vikings understood that while wool breathes, fur shelters. Layered together, they form a system that turns the body into a warm island in a frozen landscape. A small fire crackles in a temporary pit at the center of the longhouse. Builders gather around, cloaks wrapped tightly. One man lifts his cloak to show how its weave repels water. The cloth beads the melting frost, letting droplets roll off. You lift a corner of your own garment, trying the same. A few drops cling stubbornly, and you laugh. Your cloak hasn't undergone the same careful treatment with lanolin and oil. As you listen, you notice that layering is an art. A soft undertunic sits close to the skin. Above it, a thicker wool layer wraps the torso. Fur-lined cloaks carry the final weight. Each layer traps pockets of warm air, holding heat like tiny blessings. An older builder lifts his sleeve, showing the reinforced stitching inside. The thick seams prevent drafts. Preserved garments suggest Vikings sometimes used double seams, not just for strength, but also for subtle insulation. Children huddle near a pile of winter gear, giggling as they try on cloaks far too large. One child stumbles under the folds, laughter rising around you. You help lift the cloak, revealing flushed cheeks and a wide grin. The child pats the wool proudly, announcing he will wear it in a snowstorm one day. You ruffle his hair and move on. At a low bench, a man stretches a piece of leather. It is stiff initially, but he softens it with steady pressure and gentle heat from an ember. He explains that good boots are as vital as thick walls. Cold feet can sap even the strongest person. He shows a layered boot insert made of felted wool and dried grasses. You press it, feeling its softness and springiness. Tucked into a tall boot, it traps warm air close to the foot. A small detail from folklore mentions crushed juniper leaves inside boots for warmth and scent. A woman scatters some into a pair, and the sharp, clean aroma rises, recalling pine forests under snow. The group discusses which materials hold heat best. Some favor fine, tightly spun wool. Others argue that fur retains warmth more efficiently. One man insists layering wool beneath fur achieves the perfect balance. A woman notes that too much layering can restrict movement during chores. You notice how these debates echo scholarly discussions today. No single combination fits every need, and preferences varied by region. You run your hand along another cloak laid on a bench. The texture is rich and firm, edges bound with leather strips, each stitch precise. You imagine it in a blizzard, heavy, protective, comforting as the wind howls outside. Stepping out at dawn, snow crunching underfoot, you feel the thick wool hug your body like a warm embrace. A young woman approaches with a basket of dried herbs, sprinkling some into wool for storage. Lavender, mugwort, and hardy northern plants release scents that deter moths. You inhale the mix. It is strong, refreshing, and cuts through the cold. Returning to the hearth, the temporary fire glows, sending warmth across your face. Vikings drape cloaks near the heat to soften fibers, twisting them to redistribute oils. The room carries a faint smoky fragrance, blended with wool, fur, and herbs. It is the scent of winter preparation. Sitting beside the hearthstones, warmth seeping into your hands, you notice woolen tunics rustle, furs shift, and conversations blend into a soft chorus. Clothing here is more than protection. It is memory, skill, tradition, and comfort woven together. It makes the difference between surviving winter and truly living through it. As daylight fades, you close your eyes and envision the longhouse in midwinter. Families wrapped in layered wool, children tucked beneath fur blankets, floors warmed, fires crackling steadily, snow pressing against walls. Every stitch carries the knowledge and strength of generations. You open your eyes and breathe deeply. The scent of wool hangs in the air like a promise. The longhouse already feels warmer, not just from the fire, but from careful preparation. Stepping outside briefly, the crisp morning air stings your cheeks. Upon returning, you instinctively look upward. Today, the builders focus on the roof, not the beams, but the covering itself. Bundles of dried grasses, reeds, and straw are stacked near the doorway, tied neatly with twine. This thatch will become the protective layer above the longhouse, a quiet masterpiece resting like a warm, breathing blanket. You run your fingers along one of the bundles. The stalks feel dry and feathery, but when pressed together, they form a dense, springy mass. You can already picture how they will soften the harsh winter wind. Experts on northern dwellings know that Viking roof thatching was deliberate. Layers were placed with care, tightly bound to repel water, and angled to let snow slide off before it could damage the structure. Even today, some parts of Scandinavia still maintain thatched roofs to protect homes from severe storms. A small group of builders carries the first bundles up wooden ladders leaning against the rafters. They move steadily, balancing each load on their shoulders. You tilt your head and watch them tie the thatch in place with long cords. The sound of straw brushing wood fills the air, a soft rustle like tall grass in a summer breeze. From below, you notice the first layer lying thick across the rafters. The roots face upward, the stiff ends toward the weather and the soft tips beneath other layers. A technique explained with a nod by one of the older builders. This setup helps water run off smoothly, keeping the interior dry. He hands you a bundle. Pressed together, it grows surprisingly heavy. Though delicate at first glance, it becomes solid once fixed into place. As more bundles rise overhead, the long house darkens. Sunlight filtering through warms with soft, golden tones. You move closer, examining the underside. Each layer overlaps the next, forming a thick mat several hands deep. Tapping it with your knuckles, the roof responds with a muted, comforting thud. A fragment of folklore mentions households adding herbs to the thatch for protection and luck. Whether this was common is unclear, but you watch a woman climb with a small bundle of dried juniper, tucking it between layers. Its sharp, clean scent drifts upward like invisible smoke. Below, a quiet discussion unfolds about the roof's slope. One builder says a steep pitch helps snow slide quickly. Another argues a gentler slope holds snow as insulation, keeping the home warmer. Researchers have debated the same, comparing ruins and neighboring designs. There's no perfect choice, only decisions guided by weather, tradition, and experience. Today, the builders opt for a gentle slope, trusting their knowledge of local storms. You watch the thatch grow thicker. Builders press each layer with long paddles, ensuring it fits snugly, and tie cords at intervals to prevent sliding under heavy snow. The cords snap softly, making the roof feel like a woven basket rather than a simple cover. Climbing partway up a ladder, cold wood pressing into your palms, you see the thatch from above. It flows like a golden river across the house, stalks rippling in the breeze, catching faint sunlight. A builder steadies your arm as you step onto a crossbeam, laughing softly at your mix of curiosity and caution. From this height, the interior light takes shape, warm and dappled like early morning sun through trees. You imagine how comforting this will feel during the long, dark winter nights. Descending slowly, your boots slipping slightly, you watch the final bundles being lifted. The roof thickens, layer by layer, resembling the mane of a great northern beast, wild yet controlled. Builders fill the ridge with a spine of bundled straw, lashing it tightly to keep out rain. When they smooth the crest, the long house seems to exhale its first full breath. Outside, the roof blends seamlessly with the landscape. Dried grasses shimmer in the cold air, matching nearby plants. You now see how such homes could vanish into hillsides, protected from both natural and human threats. An older builder remarks that a well-maintained thatched roof can last decades. During storms, he listens to its whispering, each creak a sign the straw holds firm, each rustle a promise of warmth inside. A group sprinkles water lightly across the roof. You ask why? A woman explains that dampening helps the layers settle and bind. Droplets sparkle before sinking in, and she says that once dry, the roof hardens slightly, resisting rain and snow even better. Walking along the edge, your hand glides across the dense straw. It feels firm, resilient. Pressing gently, it springs back, alive under your touch, breathing with the wind. Inside, the thatched ceiling muffles the outside world. No harsh wind, no echoing cold, just softer air, held by dense layers. Footsteps quiet, voices intimate. The thatch absorbs sound as deeply as it holds warmth. Beside the hearthstones, you look up at the finished roof. A sense of safety drifts through you. This ceiling will withstand storms, cradle firelight, and shelter stories, dreams, laughter, and sleep. You picture snow piling on it, layering until the world outside is silent and white. Inside, the longhouse will feel like a warm tunnel through winter. As evening settles, golden tones darken to honey, then amber, finally a soft brown. Your hand on the floor feels faint warmth rising from buried stones. The house feels whole, strong, private, alive. Closing your eyes, you listen to the gentle rustle overhead, like distant waves on a quiet shore. The roof is ready. Soon the home will be too. You step back inside as weak winter sunlight spills across the clearing. The space is transformed, the thatched roof softening every sound, turning the house into a refuge against the cold outside. The double walls stand solid, and the faint scent of dried juniper lingers in the air. Today, attention shifts to something quieter but equally essential: the tools that will complete this home. These are the implements that carve, smooth, bore, and bind every piece of wood into place. You approach a low workbench where Viking tools lie in organized array. Your eyes first settle on the axes. They are not the oversized, theatrical weapons often seen in modern depictions. These are practical working axes, compact, balanced, and sharp enough to split frozen timber with precision. Lifting one by the handle, you notice its surprising lightness. The wooden grip fits comfortably in your palm, shaped by repeated smoothing and years of use. Its blade glints softly, catching a sliver of sunlight. Many know Vikings were skilled metalworkers, but seeing these tools firsthand reveals the refinement of their craft. The axe head curves gently, designed not only for cutting but for shaving fine layers of wood. A carpenter beside you demonstrates, drawing the blade across a beam in long, controlled strokes. Thin curls of wood fall like feathers, warm and fragrant despite the cold air. Next, you pick up an adze. At first, it seems unusual, the blade set perpendicular to the handle, like a small hoe adapted for woodworking. The carpenter laughs softly at your hesitation and shows how it scoops wood from uneven surfaces. With a steady chop, he lifts a perfect curl from the log. The sound resonates deeply, mellow, and soft, like a drum muted by snow. Crouching, you examine a series of augers lined neatly beside the bench. These resemble long, slender spirals of iron fixed to wooden handles. The carpenter hands you one, guiding your fingers around the grip. These tools drill holes for joints and pegs, creating strong connections without relying solely on iron nails. Turning the handle slowly, you feel the auger's weight and imagine it biting into wood, twisting deeper with each rotation. A detail often highlighted by modern artisans is Viking reliance on wooden pegs and precisely fitted joints rather than metal fasteners. Metal was valuable, so minimizing its use was practical. You admire a freshly carved joint nearby, edges smooth, angles exact. Running your fingertips along the groove, you feel the subtle texture of the wood grain, a reminder of the tree it once was. Nearby, a woman sits cross-legged, sharpening a blade with slow, practiced movements. She uses a flat stone and a small cup of water, drawing the edge across the surface with quiet focus. Each stroke whispers softly. Pausing, she holds the blade to the light, checking its sharpness. With a wry smile, she notes that dull tools waste wood and patience. She shares a small tradition passed down from her grandmother. Some carvers whisper to their tools while sharpening. Whether this serves a magical purpose or simply aids concentration, you cannot tell, but as she murmurs to the blade, a calm settles over the workspace. You move toward a group shaping a large log destined to become a final support beam. Men wield broad axes to remove thick chunks, forming the log into a uniform surface. Their strokes are rhythmic and coordinated, sending chips of wood spinning to the ground. The scent of fresh timber is warm and vibrant. An older builder gestures for you to help hold the beam steady. You brace your hands against the dense, cold wood. He nods in thanks and continues cutting along the grain. You sense how deeply these craftsmen understand their tools, not just their use, but the sound of wood responding correctly, the feel of a joint fitting perfectly, the memory of each stroke. A discussion arises about tool metals. Some argue hard, brittle iron creates the sharpest edges, while others favor slightly softer iron that resists shattering in cold. This debate mirrors modern archaeological discussions, reflecting the balance between sharpness and durability. Listening, you enjoy the authenticity of these ancient craft arguments. As another beam takes shape, a young apprentice approaches proudly, carrying a newly carved wooden mallet. The handle is smooth, polished by careful sanding, and the head solid. He hands it to you. It feels perfectly balanced, easy to swing. Mallets like this drive pegs, adjust joints, and coax stubborn planks into place. You test it with a tap on your palm, a deep, satisfying thump. Tools are scattered across the longhouse floor in purposeful disarray, sharp knives for trimming moss, long saws for shaping boards, heavy wedges for splitting logs, and delicate bone needles for sewing hides. Walking among them, you sense each piece tells a story through scratches, stains, and wrapped handles. The longhouse hums with the rhythm of work. Stepping outside, you watch two workers split a massive log into planks. They drive iron wedges with wooden mallets, the wood cracking with a resonant pop. Steam rises faintly from the fresh split, scented with resin and cold earth. You run your hand over the smooth interior, still warm from friction. Inside, finishing touches continue. Tools shape doorframes and shelves, the scrape of knives blending with mallet thuds. You notice how each tool has its own voice and rhythm. You could almost understand the work by listening alone. A young woman presents an unfinished birch bowl. Your fingers glide along its gentle curves, still rough from carving. She explains that bowls and utensils must be ready before winter deepens. Tools not only build homes, they build the objects that make life inside them possible. As the day ends, toolmakers clean their workspaces. Blades are wiped and oiled, handles checked for cracks. Mallets, chisels, and knives are arranged with quiet care near the hearthstones, warmed gently to keep moisture away. You sit a moment longer, surrounded by the calm energy of completed tasks. Hands resting on a block of timber, still carrying the scent of living wood, you sense the slow beat of winter settling in and the quiet presence of a place shaped by skill and care. Tonight the tools rest, and soon the longhouse will welcome its first true warmth. You step inside at dawn, when the sky is soft with pale pink light. A calm silence blankets the clearing, the kind that exists just before voices, footsteps, and tools start their daily rhythm. Inside, the Vikings gather near the hearth, still unlit, speaking quietly about the tasks ahead. Today is not a day for solitary work or silent carving. Today requires the entire clan moving together, a living machine made of many hands and shared effort. As you enter the center of the longhouse, you notice people forming natural groups. Some gather near timber stacks. Others linger by entrances, sharpening tools or adjusting layers of clothing. Children dart between adults, carrying small items and offering help where they can. Even before the fire ignites, the space radiates a sense of shared purpose. The builders organize the work with ease born of experience. No one gives harsh orders or argues over tasks. Instead, subtle gestures, a nod, a raised eyebrow, communicate intent. Everyone knows their place. Scholars studying early northern communities agree that longhouse construction was always communal. No single family could complete such a project alone. Neighbors, relatives, travelers, and even entire villages contributed their strength. You follow a group toward the exterior wall. They speak in low voices about where to place diagonal braces for extra stability. You offer to hold a beam steady while they test its angle. One man gently pushes. Another listens to the faint creak of the wood. A woman presses her hand against the joint, feeling for movement. When the beam aligns perfectly, they all nod together. As they peg it into place, mallets tap in steady, rhythmic beats, echoing like a heartbeat. It is not hurried but thoughtful, almost meditative. A young apprentice moves closer, offering pegs from a clay jar. He beams each time an adult accepts one. You smile, warmed by the quiet ceremony of it all. Along the eastern wall, women and older men prepare woven mats for insulation. Sitting in a semicircle, their hands move swiftly through wool and reeds. The mats rustle softly, blending with murmured conversation. One woman shares an old tale of a village that built a longhouse so quickly the spirits supposedly wandered outside all winter, puzzled by the walls. Whether true or a story born from long winter nights, it carries a gentle charm that makes you chuckle. Deeper in the longhouse, the rhythmic thudding of logs draws you toward a group preparing heavy timbers for the final support arch near the main entrance. You join as they circle a massive log. On a subtle signal, they lift in perfect coordination, moving as one body. The log rises slowly, weight evenly shared. Their voices blend into a steady hum, growing louder as the log settles into its joint. Sweat beads on foreheads despite the cold, and tension gives way as the timber rests securely. Pride flickers across their faces. Strength in a home comes not from solitary effort, but from many bodies working together. Nearby, a mother and her teenage daughter spread fresh straw across the floor. Its sweet, dry scent fills the air. They smooth it with their boots, and the daughter hums a tune, perhaps one passed down from her grandmother. Music and rhythm weave subtly through their work. Voices, footsteps, and tools create an almost ceremonial harmony. At the doorway beam, another group carves simple decorative notches. Each mark represents family identity, local tradition, or blessings for the home. An elder runs his hand over a carved symbol, explaining it offers protection from storms, and also serves as a reminder of cooperation during harsh seasons. You nod, the weight of his words sinking in. Children gather near the hearth with small wooden bowls, pretending to cook with snow and twigs. Their laughter chases away the cold, mirroring the real work around them. One girl proudly shows a small wooden spoon she carved with her father's guidance. Its edges are rough, but the shape is clear. You admire her work, and her face lights with pride. In a corner, men debate how best to reinforce the roof before heavy snow arrives. One suggests a secondary beam, another proposes tightening the cords. Their discussion remains calm and deliberate. Archaeological studies show that variations in roof reinforcement reflect regional traditions rather than a single standard. Here, you see these differences emerge naturally. Moving between groups, you notice the seamless flow of tasks. When one person finishes tying a cord, another steps in to tuck straw. When a beam needs support, hands rise instantly. Water is fetched at a moment's notice. The longhouse is more than a building. It is choreography, an unspoken understanding. You blend into the rhythm, guided by collective movement. As the sun dips, warm orange light spills through the wide doorway. Everyone gathers near the hearth for a shared rest. Stones, logs, and mats serve as seats. Bread is passed, along with small pouches of dried berries. You receive a piece of barley bread, warm from a small oven outside, and savor its dense, earthy flavor. Quiet stories emerge. A man recalls a longhouse built during an even colder winter. A woman remembers her father humming while carving beams. A young apprentice boasts of shaping pegs faster, earning laughter from adults. The day concludes as steadily as it began. Tools are set aside, straw brushed from cloaks, hands warmed by the fire. The longhouse stands taller, stronger, glowing softly in evening light. You take one last look, sensing the quiet heartbeat of the community. This home has been shaped by dozens of hands, countless stories, and many shared breaths. As the builders step outside to greet the twilight, you sense something both simple and profound. Warmth is not created from timber alone. It emerges from people working together, trusting one another, and intertwining their efforts with the structure they raise. You enter the longhouse at midday. Outside, the air bites sharply, and the sky hangs heavy and gray. Inside, the building stands proudly, yet subtle gaps still demand attention. From the far wall, soft voices reach your ears. Following them, you find a group of Vikings crouched low, inspecting narrow slivers of daylight sneaking through the wooden planks. Even the tiniest crack can become a frozen knife in winter, and today they are determined to stop every draft. Kneeling beside them, you press your fingers along the edge where two timbers meet. A thread of icy air brushes your skin, faint, yet unmistakable. You almost recoil instinctively. The Vikings exchange knowing looks. They have faced this challenge through countless winters. Nearby, a basket holds dark, sticky mud, drawn from the edge of a marsh. Carefully you reach in. The mud is cold and thick, clinging to your glove with surprising tenacity. A woman laughs at your startled expression and explains that this mixture, often called chinking mud, is one of their most reliable defenses against winter drafts. Mud from marshes contains fibers, tiny roots, and minerals that bind it tightly. When pressed into wall gaps, it hardens into a dense, durable seal. You watch her scoop a handful and press it firmly into the seam between two planks. The mud squishes slightly, then adheres. She smooths it with a flat wooden paddle, her movements steady and almost graceful. When she steps back, the crack disappears, replaced by a streak of earth that seems as if it has always been there. Experts studying Norse buildings note that chinking materials varied widely. Some areas used peat mixed with hair or straw. Others relied on turf scraps. In regions with abundant marshes, this heavy mud became the preferred solution. You inhale deeply, catching the mineral scent rising from the damp mixture. It smells of wet earth and cold mornings, oddly comforting as it mingles with the aroma of fresh timber. Children gather nearby, eager to help. They carry small scraps of moss, guided by adults to tuck them into crevices before covering them with mud. The moss cushions the gaps, expanding and contracting with moisture. You help a young boy press a line of moss into a seam. His hands move with surprising confidence, and he beams when an elder praises his work. Around the wall, conversation grows lively. One man argues that adding sheep hair strengthens the mud. Another insists mud alone suffices. A woman recalls her grandmother mixing crushed shells into the mud to repel insects. The discussion mirrors modern archaeological debates. Fibers may have been common, yet pure mud was also widely used. Both methods likely existed, shaped by local resources. The builders continue, sealing every crack with steady care. Mud goes in thick, smoothed meticulously, then left to harden. When dry, it will block the cold entirely. You press your palm against a finished section, cool and firm, the mud already promises protection. You imagine it stiffening over days, forming a tight barrier against the wind. One builder tests the mud by drawing a faint line across the plank. She remarks, "Cracks are like sneaky wolves, ignore one, and the pack will follow." Others chuckle, but her metaphor lingers. In this climate, even a small draft can threaten a home's warmth. At the outer wall, men work in practiced formation. One applies moss, another packs mud, a third smooths the surface. Their movements flow together, a quiet, coordinated rhythm. Stepping outside to watch, you see the longhouse transform. Dark streaks of mud fill every seam, blending seamlessly with the sod between the timber beams. Cold air brushes your face sharply, and you draw your cloak tighter, appreciating the labor unfolding before you. Without this chinking, even thick walls and clever insulation would struggle to hold heat. Tiny weaknesses vanish, one by one, beneath practiced hands. A woman wets her paddle and spreads the mud evenly, creating a snug seal. She hands you the paddle. Pressing it gently against the mud, you drag it upward. The seam fills cleanly, and she nods approvingly.
You return to the longhouse just as the afternoon settles into a quiet, cold stillness. The wind carries the sharp scent of snow, and the sky hangs low, a pale gray blanket pressing against the treetops. Inside, the faint warmth from the test fire lingers, curling along the beams like a subtle promise. Today, the Vikings focus on a part of the home that rarely attracts attention, but quietly determines whether families will eat well throughout the winter: the storage rooms. These small chambers are located near the back of the living area, close enough to benefit from household warmth, yet far enough from the hearth to remain cool and dry. You follow a group of women and older men into one such room. At first glance, it seems simple, nothing more than a narrow alcove framed with timber. Yet stepping inside, you notice a change in the air. It is cooler here, noticeably so. The walls, carefully packed with turf and mud, maintain a steady temperature. It almost feels like entering a natural refrigerator. One of the women lifts a woven basket of dried fish. The salty, smoky aroma drifts toward you. She places it on a raised wooden shelf, explaining that storage rooms must not be too warm, or dried goods could soften or spoil. Studies of northern settlements show that Viking storage spaces often balance the warmth from the living area with the natural coolness of the surrounding earth. This balance kept food neither frozen solid nor vulnerable to rot. You run your fingers along a shelf, polished smooth by knives and hands over many seasons. Surprisingly, the wood feels warm compared to the air, likely having absorbed heat from past cooking fires or passing bodies. The shelf sits high enough to avoid ground moisture. Beneath it, a layer of pebbles and hardened earth wicks away dampness. You crouch, touching the pebbles. They shift softly under your fingers, cool yet dry. A group of builders enters carrying a small chest of stout planks. Its lid creaks open, revealing bags of barley, small bundles of herbs, and tightly wrapped pouches of dried berries. One man explains that his wife dried the berries in late summer to preserve their sweetness for winter. His voice carries quiet affection as he sets the chest in the corner. Another person brings a slab of cheese wrapped in cloth. The scent is sharp, earthy, and slightly sour. The woman placing it on the shelf explains that cheese continues to age during winter, with the cool, steady air deepening its flavor. She pats the bundle gently, almost as if it were a sleeping child. As you move through the room, you notice small holes near the roofline. These allow subtle airflow, not enough for cold drafts, but just enough to prevent moisture accumulation. Excavated sites reveal this thoughtful design. Researchers suggest that ventilation gaps controlled humidity and allowed light smoke to drift in during certain seasons. Smoke acted as a natural preservative, keeping insects away. One man climbs onto a stool to check the airflow with the back of his hand, nodding with approval. Others debate the size of the ventilation holes. One favors a larger gap for fresher air. Another warns that too much could invite frost. Their discussion mirrors an ongoing question among experts. How much ventilation did Viking storage rooms truly need? You watch quietly, fascinated by how ancient practical debates echo into modern research. Children wander in with armfuls of dried herbs, thyme, nettle, and angelica. The sharp scent fills the room. You rub a small branch of thyme between your fingers, releasing its aroma. One girl explains that herbs deter pests and add flavor when fresh greens are long gone. A boy hurries past, placing clay jars on a shelf. A woman opens one, revealing salt. She sprinkles a pinch onto the ground as a symbolic blessing, smiling as she explains a belief taught by her mother. Food kept with care brings harmony to a home. Whether tradition or truth, her handling of the jar reflects deep reverence. In another corner, a man digs a shallow pit lined with stones, intended for tubers like turnips and carrots. He spreads a thin layer of sand across the stones. It feels dry and cold beneath your fingertips, then places the vegetables carefully, covering them with more sand. The method, rooted in ancient practices, integrates preservation directly into the longhouse. A small clay oil lamp flickers on a stone ledge, casting soft, golden light across the shelves of food, tools, and herbs. The storage room hums quietly with preparation. Each basket, jar, and shelf represents a promise that winter will not catch the family unprepared. You stand, feeling the cool air settle around your shoulders. You imagine the longhouse deep in winter, snow piling against the walls, wind moaning outside, and inside the small chamber, shelves stocked with months of care. Fresh bread dipped into warm stews, cheese carved with care, children sneaking dried berries, the quiet comfort of knowing there is enough. A voice calls from the doorway. More baskets arrive, filled with smoked lamb and dried mushrooms. The scent curls through the cool air. People sort the goods carefully, heavier items lower, lighter ones higher. Organization feels strategic. Everything has a place. You help arrange a shelf of herbs, careful not to crush the brittle leaves. A woman nods, approving your care. The room transforms from storage into the hidden heart of the home, a quiet guardian nurturing the family. Stepping back into the main hall, warmth returns to your skin. The storage room remains cool and calm. Ready. Winter can come. This home will feed its people well. Dusk settles over the clearing, turning the sky a muted lavender. The longhouse feels warmer, more secure. Its walls hold firm, the roof shelters quietly, and the storage room rests behind you like a heartbeat. Nearby, builders gather with wood and blankets, preparing sleeping spaces. In a harsh winter where night devours daylight, these nooks will become small islands of safety and warmth. You watch as a woman glides her hand along a raised wooden platform that runs along one side of the hall. The platform sits several hands above the floor, a deliberate choice. Studies of northern homes show that elevated beds kept sleepers away from the lingering cold near the ground. Cold air always sinks. Even a few inches make a noticeable difference. You kneel beside the platform, touching the smooth wood. Feels cool now, but you can picture how quickly it will warm once layered with blankets and furs. The woman signals for help, and together you lift a heavy pelt onto the platform. The fur spreads across the surface, thick and soft, radiating warmth almost instantly. Running your fingers through it, you feel the dense undercoat that once protected an animal through harsh winters like this one. Children gather nearby, curious. One brings woven wool blankets, coarse and fragrant with lanolin and smoke, a scent both earthy and comforting. You help drape one across the platform, smoothing its edges. The heavy, tightly woven fabric is designed to trap warmth even on the coldest nights. A man approaches carrying a wooden beam. He places it at the platform's edge and begins fastening it with pegs. You observe his careful movements. He is building a low barrier, just high enough to prevent blankets, furs, or sleeping children from sliding off during the night. When he taps the last peg into place, he steps back and smiles, inviting you to test it. Pressing gently, you feel the beam's sturdy resistance. Looking under the platform, you notice a shallow crate sliding beneath. The woman explains that raised beds often doubled as storage for clothing, tools, or emergency food. She slides the crate back into place, and you admire the practicality. Every inch of the home serves a purpose. Nearby, a faint conversation rises among a few elders debating whether to hang curtains around the sleeping area. One argues cloth curtains trap warmth, creating cozy pockets of air. Another counters that too much enclosure limits airflow and could make the room stuffy when the hearth burns strongly. Their discussion mirrors debates among modern scholars. Did all Viking sleeping spaces have curtains, or only some? No definitive answer exists. The women decide on a compromise. Partial curtains, thick wool panels on wooden rods, are hung only on the platform's outer edge. You help lift one into place. It falls softly, forming a shaded cocoon. Stepping inside, the curtain muffles outside sounds slightly, creating a private space. Sitting on the platform, you absorb the atmosphere. The scent of wool, the softness of fur, and the muted glow of late afternoon light filtering through the fabric. You imagine lying here during the dead of winter, a storm rattling the roof while the hearth crackles in the distance, stone floors radiating warmth, and the gentle breathing of others nearby. Sleep feels almost within reach. A young apprentice adjusts a wooden frame near another platform, proudly showing you the small notches carved along its top beam to hold oil lamps. His mother will place a lamp there each night, casting a warm, flickering glow across the curtains. You envision the light dancing gently, turning the sleeping spaces into soothing amber alcoves. A small boy brings bundles of dried herbs and places them beneath the platform's edge. Curious, you ask why. His grandmother explains that the herbs repel pests and scent the bedding pleasantly. Thyme, yarrow, and angelica, gathered in late summer when the sun still warmed the earth. Breathing in the faint herbal perfume, you notice how it adds unexpected freshness to the nook. A woman kneels beside you with a thin animal hide, spreading it across the platform's center. Cool and smooth, The hide adds an extra layer of insulation, blocking the chill from creeping up through the wood on extremely cold nights. You help smooth its edges. As it warms under your hands, the hide softens. Across the hall, another family prepares their sleeping area. A man folds wool garments carefully to serve as pillows. Children test them, giggling as they rest their heads. Their laughter fills the longhouse, warming the space even more than the fire. Near the entrance, a couple debates stacking extra firewood by their nook. The man insists it will add warmth. His partner teases him, suggesting laziness is the real reason. Their playful banter draws quiet smiles from those nearby, echoing domestic conversations likely repeated in longhouses for centuries. As evening approaches, the workers hang one last curtain. The wool panel shifts gently, catching the soft glow of an oil lamp. The longhouse begins to feel less like a construction site and more like a home, a place where warmth comes not only from fire and walls, but from shared effort, stories, and breath. You step back, admiring the transformed sleeping nooks. Raised platforms, layered furs, tucked herbs, half-drawn curtains. You imagine the family's first night here, curled under heavy blankets, finally resting after months of preparation. A woman invites you to sit beside her. You lower yourself gently, letting the softness cradle your weight. She explains that sleeping spaces hold a quiet sacredness. Dreams, memories, and deep rest. They protect the spirit as much as the body. Glancing around the longhouse, you feel its enveloping calm. Warmth will gather here, night after night, winter after winter. As you rise to leave the nook, brushing wool fibers from your cloak, you carry the knowledge that a home's warmth often begins where people lay their heads. Stepping outside briefly, the cold air clears your lungs. Evening light stretches across the clearing, pale and soft, casting long shadows. Returning inside, you notice a group of Vikings near the main entrance, examining the doorway with the same seriousness as walls, roof, and hearth. They are building the layered entrance that shields the longhouse from icy winds. You step closer and feel a faint draft slip past your cheek. Today it is gentle, but in a winter storm, this gap could bring a biting gale. The Vikings understand that a simple door would not be enough. The entrance functions as a barrier, a buffer that slows the cold before it reaches the main living space. A man lifts a thick wooden frame, shaped precisely to fit. You run your hand along its edge, dense, smooth, but still faintly fragrant with sap. He explains that this will be the storm door, a heavy outer layer meant to block the force of wind. Architectural studies of early northern houses often note that many longhouses had double entrances, an outer door to blunt the cold, and an inner door to preserve warmth. This setup creates a small chamber, trapping cold air before it enters the main hall. The builders raise the frame with deliberate care, fitting it snugly against the outer wall and testing for gaps with meticulous hands. A woman kneels to inspect the threshold, running her fingers along the bottom. She frowns at a thin draft and quickly presses tufts of moss into the gap. The moss expands slightly, sealing the space. She glances at you, satisfied. A boy brings the door plank, thick and reinforced with diagonal braces, heavy like a solid promise. You help lift it, surprised by its weight. The builders attach wooden hinges carved from pegs and sockets, testing the door with slow, deliberate swings. The sound is deep and reassuring, wood meeting wood with quiet authority. Another group begins shaping the inner door. Lighter and easier to open, it sits just inside the outer door. Together, the two create a small vestibule. You step into it, imagining winter air entering, pausing briefly, and losing momentum before reaching the inner space. Pressing your hand against the wall, you feel the turf behind it, designed to retain warmth even here. A discussion arises about hanging a hide curtain behind the inner door. One man argues it adds insulation, another that heavy hides make movement awkward. A woman proposes splitting the hide into 2 panels for easy passage. This debate mirrors uncertainties in archaeological studies, where some longhouses show evidence of coverings and others do not. They decide on the divided curtain. You help hold one panel while she attaches it to a wooden rod. The hide feels warm and supple. When hung, It sways gently, brushing your shoulders as you pass through. The air behind it feels noticeably warmer. A man enters carrying dried reeds, explaining that some homes used reed mats on the vestibule floor to absorb snow from boots and cloaks. He unrolls the mat, its surface rustling, faintly scented of riverbanks and summer heat, settling like a quiet welcome. Two young builders place a narrow wooden bench nearby. You ask its purpose. One grins. It's for removing snow from boots and shaking ice from cloaks. In this climate, the bench is more than furniture, it's a survival tool. The Vikings add a small shelf along the wall, placing stones warmed by the hearth. They radiate gentle heat, drying gloves or softening frozen leather. You lift one carefully, feeling the warmth even through your glove. A grandmother arrives with a pouch of salt, sprinkling a trail across the threshold while muttering a blessing. She explains that salt protects against misfortune. Whether superstition or practicality, the act feels grounding and reassuring. As evening deepens, the outer door is tested again. It closes with a firm thud. Cold wind brushes it from outside, but none reaches you. The vestibule stands firm, a silent guardian. You sit on the bench, watching firelight flicker across the main hall. Without this layered entrance, winter would spill inside like an uninvited enemy. Now the longhouse is armored. A child runs past, laughing through the hide curtain, stirring a wave of warm air. You follow into the main room and glance back at the completed entrance. Feel strong, deliberate, alive with purpose. You inhale slowly, letting the warmth settle. The longhouse is prepared for the harshest cold. Each new layer, seal, and structure diminishes winter's threat. Outside, the wind howls, but inside, warmth gathers and the door holds firm. Evening settles over the clearing. Shadows stretch across the floor. Builders gather near the hearth, holding small clay lamps, carved holders, and containers of precious oil. Light is as vital as heat in a home meant to survive long northern nights. Without it, winter becomes a world of darkness, interrupted only by fire. The Vikings knew how to coax soft light from simple materials. A woman kneels by the hearthstones, arranging tiny clay lamps. Each has a small bowl and narrow spout for a wick. She fills one with oil, tilting the jug with practiced ease. A thin ribbon of shimmering liquid flows in, slightly sweet and smoky, reminiscent of rendered animal fat from past fires. Viking lamps often use tallow or fish oil, producing gentle, steady, long-lasting light enough to guide evening tasks or cast warmth over sleeping areas. A young girl brings a bundle of wicks made from plant fibers and sheep wool. She hands you one, soft between your fingers. Placing it in a lamp bowl, she lights it with a glowing ember from the hearth. The flame rises slowly, steady and warm. The light in the longhouse is warm, golden, and soft, perfectly suited for rest and storytelling. You watch the flame flicker gently, untouched by drafts, thanks to the newly sealed walls and carefully designed smoke vent. Elsewhere, a group begins hanging small lamps on wooden pegs along the interior walls. You help one man lift a lamp into place. When released, it swings slightly, casting golden reflections across the wooden surfaces. Shadows ripple and soften, and the man steps back, satisfied. On a low bench near the far wall, elders discuss how much oil to store for winter. One argues for filling every jar completely. Another cautions that storing too much oil could risk spoilage if the room warms. Their conversation mirrors questions modern researchers still ask when studying ancient storage finds. Some homes kept large supplies of tallow and fish oil, while others rationed carefully. A woman rises and brings a small jar toward you. She removes the lid, letting the scent rise. Strong, salty, unmistakably fishy, it makes you wince slightly. She smiles and explains that not all lamps smell pleasant, but during long winter darkness, even a fish oil flame is welcome. You nod, understanding that comfort often comes in imperfect forms. Nearby, two men carve wooden candle stands. Candles were rare in northern homes, but beeswax was used sparingly for important nights. The rich, sweet scent of melting beeswax mixes with the sharper aroma of fish oil and the earthy smell of juniper tucked between rafters. The long house becomes a tapestry of smells. A young apprentice demonstrates adjusting a wick, lifting it with a hooked stick. The flame brightens, then softens again. He explains that controlling the wick regulates how fast the oil burns. You watch him work with care, brow furrowed, hands precise. In a firelit world, tending a flame is quiet craftsmanship. A mother gathers her children near the sleeping nooks, placing lamps low, away from fabrics, ensuring the flames are steady and safe. She says the lamps offer comfort during storms when the wind outside howls. One boy rests his cheek against her arm, asking if the lamps will burn all night. She smiles, assuring him they will. Sagas and oral traditions sometimes mention families carving protective symbols near lampstands to ward off misfortune. Some preserved timbers bear these markings. You notice an elder carving such a symbol, explaining it's a blessing for peaceful nights. You carry a lamp to the far end of the hall. Its flame quivers but remains steady thanks to the roof vent guiding drafts upward. Placing it on a small shelf, you watch the light stretch across woven mats, blanket edges, and carved beams. Shadows soften, and the long house transforms into a warm cocoon. Builders start placing smooth, pale stones behind lamps to reflect light outward. You crouch beside one arrangement, seeing how even a single stone amplifies illumination without smoke or heat. A woman pats the stone, explaining that proper placement can brighten a whole wall with just one flame. Nearby, a child dips her fingers into a soot and ash mixture, spreading it under a lamp to prevent oil drips. Her fingers blackened. She grins proudly. You watch as her mother cleans her hands and pats her hair, while lamps continue finding their places around the room. The long house glows with overlapping amber light. Roof beams absorb some brightness, turning a deep honey tone, and turf between beams softens it further. Peaceful and almost dreamlike, the space invites quiet. You sit by the hearth, watching lamps flicker as the fire crackles softly. Smoke rises gently through the vent, allowing clean, steady flames. Light dances across tools, gleaming faintly on blades and handles.
A group debates how many lamps should stay lit through the longest winter nights. One woman says a single lamp per sleeping nook is enough. Another insists the hearth alone can sustain the night. A man counters that small lamps guide anyone who wakes in darkness. Their calm discussion reflects an age-old balance, light as comfort and necessity weighed against resources. Children gather near the hearth, watching flames paint patterns on reed mats and rafters. You tilt your head and notice too. The flickering light highlights curves of beams, textures of thatch, and subtle shadows where walls meet the floor. The long house seems alive. Outside, night deepens, and the lamps glow brighter in comparison. The cold wind feels distant, muffled by thick walls and warm light. You inhale deeply, tasting faint tallow and wood smoke. This light is gentle. It does not chase away night but softens it, inviting sleep, conversation, weaving, carving, and storytelling. You rise slowly, feeling the warmth held in the air. When winter arrives fully, these small flames will be as vital as the hearth, guiding hands, comforting restless children, and keeping the long house glowing like a lantern in a frozen world. Tonight, the lamps flicker gently, and the home settles into itself, ready for the long nights ahead. Morning arrives muted, with early light filtered through clouds promising snow by evening. Inside, warmth greets you like an old friend. Lamps smolder, embers glow faintly, and voices from neighboring families drift through the doorway, carrying laughter and familiarity. The Vikings understood a practical truth. No home faces winter alone. Close households bring more than companionship, they bring survival. It acts as a shield against the cold. You step outside and feel the morning breeze brush against your skin. Around the clearing, several smaller buildings stand close to the main longhouse. You had noticed them before, but only now do you grasp the reasoning behind their placement. The houses are close enough that warm air radiates between them, creating pockets where the wind loses its sharpness. Archaeological surveys of early northern settlements often show that homes clustered tightly, forming small communities where warmth, resources, and labor moved easily between families. As you walk among the gathering, a woman points to the narrow space between two longhouses. The gap is sheltered from wind by overlapping roofs. She explains that snow settles softly here instead of blowing freely, creating a natural windbreak that shields the homes during the coldest nights. Running your hand along a wall, you feel the air calm, as if the longhouses themselves breathe warmth into the shared space. A group of men sets down baskets filled with straw and driftwood near the entrance. One explains that every household in the cluster contributes materials. Today, this family helps finish the final insulation. Tomorrow, another might provide fish oil or carved pegs. This rhythm of exchange flows effortlessly, like an unspoken agreement among neighbors. You carry a basket inside, feeling its weight scratch your palms and release a faint grassy scent. Inside, the longhouse fills with visitors who join the work willingly. A young man from a nearby home kneels by the hearth, checking the stones and murmuring approval at how they've settled. Another climbs onto the sleeping platform, examining the hide curtains and noting how well they retain heat. You sense that these inspections come from both skill and care. Everyone here has built homes of their own. They know what to look for and what keeps the cold at bay. Near the entrance, two elderly women exchange stories of winters past. One recalls a season when people slept in shifts, tending the hearth at night. The other tells of a storm so fierce it buried an entire fence under snow taller than a grown man. Their voices rise and fall with quiet reverence. These memories shape how settlements build and survive. A lively discussion begins nearby about how many animals to shelter indoors on the coldest nights. One argues that cattle alone can raise indoor temperatures noticeably, another says goats provide more warmth due to their constant movement. Their debate reflects a wider observation noted by researchers. Animal heat was a crucial resource, and communities coordinated how much livestock each household could house without overcrowding. You lean against a beam, amused by their friendly rivalries. Children gather by the doorway to greet friends from other homes. They rush outside, boots crunching over frost-hardened ground, their laughter lifting spirits even as the air grows colder. You watch them play in the narrow spaces between houses, where wind softens and shadows fall gently. These sheltered pockets of warmth become their winter playgrounds. Later, walking toward the edge of the settlement, someone points out the subtle curve of the houses along the hillside. At first it seems accidental, but soon you see the logic. The homes form a loose arc, each facing roughly the same direction, their backs braced against prevailing winds. This arrangement shelters them from gusts coming off the sea. Historians note that settlements often follow natural windbreaks, combining environmental protection with human ingenuity. You run your fingers along a sod wall, feeling how the thick turf has frozen slightly outside while remaining warmer inside. A neighbor explains that clustered homes help stabilize temperatures. Heat radiates outward, slowing the freezing of the ground between them. Snow collects evenly, serving as natural insulation. You crouch and touch it, cold but not the biting chill of open fields. As the sun rises higher, the settlers begin a shared task. Several families gather wood for winter repairs. You join, moving in an organized line from storage to each home. The work develops a rhythm of footsteps, passing hands, and muffled thuds. This communal labor ensures each house can withstand storms. Scholars studying ancient wood piles note similar evidence of coordinated gathering and maintenance. One woman carries a pot of warm broth for the workers. Steam rises, carrying the scent of root vegetables and herbs. You wrap your hands around the bowl, warmth seeps through your fingers and chest. You sip slowly, listening to voices mingling, stories, laughter, advice flowing freely. Children dash inside for blankets. A dog curls near the doorway, fur thick and eyes half closed. Looking at the long house from outside, surrounded by smaller homes, it seems to nestle into the village like a child wrapped in furs. No wind strikes it directly, no cold slips through unnoticed. Each family, each house, supports the others. This is warmth built not just from walls or roofs, but through community. You follow a group inside. Oil lamps cast a soft glow. The warmth here comes not only from fire or heated stones, but from people moving, talking, breathing together. Even in deep winter, the core of warmth is not a hearth, a wall, or a blanket. It is the presence of others. A young girl rests on her mother's lap near the hearth. A neighbor adds a log to the fire. Someone adjusts a lamp. Another hums quietly. These small gestures weave a fabric of warmth throughout the home. You settle near the fire, watching golden light flicker on the double walls. Outside, the settlement shields the longhouse. Inside, people shield each other. As the glow spreads, you understand that shared warmth is multiplied warmth. Earlier, you step into the longhouse, the air still scented with last night's smoke. Outside, cold and stillness suggest an approaching snowfall. Inside, a gentle bustle surrounds the hearth. Builders gather baskets, wooden rods, kindling and carefully dried logs. Voices are low and steady, as though aware that what happens next will define the winter's warmth. You move closer to the hearth pit, its stones arranged in a neat circle, some retaining yesterday's heat. You rest your hand on one. It feels alive, storing warmth like a quiet memory. The Vikings gather around the pit with near-ceremonial attention. A woman kneels, lifting and adjusting stones, explaining how they must be angled to allow air to flow beneath the firewood. Without proper airflow, smoke would choke the room. Among scholars of Old Norse homes, it's well known that hearths were designed with remarkable precision. Placed at the center of the longhouse, they radiated heat evenly. Their shape guided air upward, directing smoke toward the vent above. You look at the vent now, just a narrow opening, but you can sense the subtle pull of air rising like an invisible ladder. A man approaches, holding a handful of birch bark. He demonstrates how the thin bark curls easily, how its oils ignite quickly, even when damp. He places it gently in the center of the hearth. You touch a piece, noting its papery texture. Its scent recalls forest walks under cold skies. Birch bark, he says with a quiet smile, is your friend when winter tests you. Next, a young girl brings small sticks of kindling. She arranges them carefully, forming a tiny, playful structure. She glances at you shyly, then proudly explains that her father taught her this pattern to help the fire catch faster. Her hands tremble slightly from the cold, but her movements remain steady. Once the kindling is in place, the builders add thicker logs of dried wood. These carry a faint scent of pine and resin. You lift one, surprised by its weight, and place it across the smaller sticks, forming the base for the first substantial flame. A man steps back and nods. Everything is ready. Before the fire is lit, the group pauses. There is a quiet, unspoken moment. Hearth fires mark beginnings, the start of warmth, family life inside the home, stories unfolding through long winter nights. Some see lighting a fire for the first time as a gesture of good fortune. Others view it simply as tradition. Either way, the moment feels almost sacred. A woman steps forward, holding a glowing ember in a clay bowl. She bends low, transferring it onto the birch bark. You hold your breath as a thin wisp of smoke curls upward. The bark ignites, glowing bright orange. The kindling catches next. Flames rise slowly, stretching like waking limbs. The hearth comes alive. Warmth radiates outward in gentle waves, touching your fingertips, cheeks, and chest, soft but unmistakable, like a reassuring hand on your shoulder. As the fire finds its rhythm, smoke ascends in a thin, graceful ribbon. You lift your eyes to the roof vent and see it rise steadily. A soft current of air from the doorway feeds the flame. The longhouse breathes for the first time. Someone closes the outer door, then the inner. The room's pressure shifts slightly, the air grows calmer, warmer. Smoke no longer drifts where it shouldn't but moves cleanly, drawn upward by the vent like water flowing downhill. This balance of air, heat, and movement is neither accidental nor fully understood even today. Some researchers suggest Viking roof shapes created natural drafts. Others point to subtle gaps in the walls that guided airflow. Debate continues, as no two reconstructed homes behave exactly the same. Children creep closer to the hearth, faces lit by flickering gold. They hold out their hands, laughing when the warmth brushes their palms. A mother gently gathers them back, reminding them to respect the fire. Comforting as it is, heat remains a force to be treated with care. A man places a large stone near the fire's edge. Heated stones help maintain warmth through the night, absorbing heat slowly and releasing it long after the fire burns low. You position another stone opposite him. Cold now, it will soon hold heat like a quiet secret. In a corner, an older woman boils water in a bronze pot. Steam rises with herbal scents. She adds dried leaves, filling the longhouse with fragrance. Warm drinks keep spirits strong during long winter nights. She hands you a wooden cup. Warmth flows from the vessel into your hands. The fire crackles, sparks pop softly, and shadows move across the walls like living brushstrokes. You sit on a low bench, watching the flames. The longhouse feels truly alive. Heat has settled into the walls, the floor, the beams above. Double walls trap warmth. The roof thatch softens it. The stone floor radiates it. Everything built so far has led to this moment. A child asks why the vent must remain open. One of the builders kneels and explains that fire, like people, needs to breathe. If the vent closes, smoke fills the home. If too open, cold rushes in. Finding balance is part of tending the fire, and tending the fire is part of tending life. The child nods thoughtfully, making you smile quietly. As the flames deepen to a rich red, someone adjusts the logs for even burning. Another adds a twist of birch bark to refresh the fire. Everyone, from elders to children, understands the hearth. It is a shared rhythm, moving through the entire settlement. You rise slowly, letting warmth push against your back as you walk to the entrance chamber. The outer space feels colder, but the curtain keeps most of the chill away. Glancing back, the fire glows like the heart of the longhouse, soft golden light spilling across sleeping nooks, storage spaces, and carved beams. It feels like stepping into a warm memory. Drawn back to the hearth, you watch the fire crackle, smoke rising in thin spirals. Closing your eyes, you feel warmth settle into your bones. The longhouse breathes now, and winter outside loses a fraction of its power. You awaken to the soft crackle of embers shifting. The fire has lasted through the night. Standing, you notice the interior air is warmer than the world beyond. Yet warmth is living. If not tended carefully, it slips away. Today, the Vikings teach how they maintain heat through ventilation, moisture control, and the delicate art of circulating fresh air without letting winter invade. The builders begin by inspecting the smoke vent above the hearth, even before a flame roars beneath it. The vent directs a cool draft gently upward. You stand beneath it and lift your hand, feeling the subtle current carrying smoke and moisture out of the house. A man explains that controlling airflow is essential. It is the key to a longhouse that stays warm without filling with smoke. Too little air smothers the hearth. Too much lets warmth escape. Researchers often note that Viking smoke vents were adjustable, though the exact methods remain partly unclear. Some suggest sliding wooden covers, others propose woven mats or hides that could be shifted. Likely, it varied from home to home. Today, the Vikings use a layered hide that rolls or lowers depending on the weather. You watch a woman climb a short ladder to adjust it, leaving only a narrow slit open. Instantly, the air balances, like a living creature finding its breath. You kneel near the hearth, feeling the warmth radiate outward. Even the stone edges of the floor hold gentle heat. Yet, the builders warn against sealing the house too tightly. Moisture from cooking, drying clothes, and breathing builds quickly. If trapped, it soaks walls and bedding, leaving everything cold and heavy. A man lifts a wool blanket, shaking it lightly. A faint mist rises. He notes that dampness is winter's silent enemy. You move to a wall where hardened, shrinking mud seals gaps. Pressing it with your fingers, you feel its cool, solid surface. Builders tap the surface, listening for hollow echoes. A woman explains that moisture inside the wall can freeze, crack the mud, and reopen gaps. Regular inspections maintain wall strength. You help patch a small line near the base, pressing the mud firmly. The simple task warms your fingers. Two children carry damp clothing to a drying rack above the hearth. The rack is sturdy, made of wooden poles tied together. As they hang garments, steam rises almost immediately. A mother joins them, placing heavier cloaks near the edges. The heat dries the fabric slowly, preventing mold and keeping the home fresh. You realize moisture management is about more than comfort. It is survival. Near the entrance, a young man checks for drafts. He runs a small tuft of wool along the door frame. When it flutters slightly, he nods and adds moss to the seam. You notice his careful movements. Even a small draft can draw warmth from the room, yet he ensures the house still breathes. They leave a tiny, deliberate gap beneath the hide curtain, allowing just enough airflow to keep the space fresh without chilling it. A grandmother enters with a small clay pot of glowing coals. She sprinkles crushed herbs over the embers, releasing a warm, woody scent. She explains that certain herbs help keep air pleasant when the house is sealed for long periods. You inhale deeply, the fragrance wrapping around you like a soft scarf. It mingles with the hearth's warmth, making the longhouse feel lived in, not closed off. A discussion begins about roof vent use during the coldest weeks. One man insists on opening it several times daily to release smoke and steam. Another warns that too much opening wastes heat. A woman suggests watching the rafters. Condensation signals it's time to adjust. Their conversation reflects an enduring challenge, balancing fresh air and warmth. You watch the demonstration. A builder lifts the hide slightly, and a thin stream of warm air rises, shimmering faintly. Children gasp quietly. When he lowers it again, the room steadies itself. Small adjustments make a clear difference. The longhouse responds like a living creature. Near the sleeping platforms, a young woman checks for dampness under the furs. She lifts a corner of a heavy pelt and feels the wood below. She smiles. Furs trap warmth beautifully, but must stay dry. Wet fur is heavy, cold, and nearly impossible to heat in winter. You help fluff the furs, letting fresh air reach their base. At the far corner, a man stacks firewood loosely to keep it dry. A young apprentice asks why they do not stack it tightly to save space. The man explains that wood must breathe, otherwise, trapped moisture makes it hiss and spit when burned. Dry wood burns clean and warm, while wet wood steals heat and smokes. The apprentice listens, absorbing the lesson. Another group stirs a clay vessel of lamp oil. Fish oil thickens in cold weather, becoming hard to use. They place the jar briefly near the hearth to soften it. The faint scent mixes with the warming air, a minor inconvenience winter makes familiar. You follow a woman to an inner wall with a shallow clay bowl of water. She warms it near the hearth, then moves it to a central beam. Moisture from cooking and breathing can dry the air too much. Overly dry conditions crack beams and make furs brittle. The bowl keeps the air balanced. Similar methods are believed to have been used in early northern homes to maintain comfort. Moving through the house, you notice the subtle adjustments. Shifting vents, warm water bowls, blankets shaken out, seams repacked, pots moved near the fire. Each action maintains a balance of warmth and airflow. You sit by the hearth. The longhouse is warm but not stifling, fresh but not drafty. The air tastes clean, touched by herbs, smoke, and the faint sweetness of drying wool. The home breathes because its people guide it with patient care. As evening light softens the room, someone adds a log to the fire. Flames rise gently. Children settle near sleeping nooks, adults converse quietly. The longhouse is alive. Warmth endures because the home and its people constantly tend it, just as they care for children, animals, and stories. By twilight, you understand that a warm home is not merely built, it is nurtured and maintained daily through winter. Morning arrives with a low, rumbling hush. Stepping outside, you are met by a wall of white. Snow drifts softly from the sky, each flake floating without rush. The wind is calm for now, but the air carries the heavy weight of an approaching storm. Stepping back into the longhouse, you see the Vikings already at work. Today's focus is winter defense, reinforcing the home ahead of the season's first true blizzard. Inside, the fire glows warmly at the center, a steady pulse of heat. People gather with tools, woven mats, spare beams, and bundles of straw. Their movements are deliberate and calm. They have weathered storms far harsher than this. A man presses his hand against the wall, listening for the faint rattle of cold wind. Feeling a subtle tremor, he calls others to strengthen the outer layer. You join them outside, where snow lands lightly on your cloak. They lift heavy sod slabs and place them carefully against the lower walls. The edges are frozen, but dense, forming a natural buffer. You grip a slab, surprised at its weight. When set in place, the wall feels sturdier under your hands. Archaeological studies of northern longhouses note that seasonal reinforcements were common during the coldest months. Sod, snow, straw, and stacked firewood acted as temporary shields against wind. You see this in practice as women and teenagers pile straw in corners where gusts tend to sneak through. The straw rustles softly, carrying the faint scent of dried fields. One woman steps back to inspect the wall, squinting against the bright snow, then moves to help another group stretch a thick woven mat across the main entrance. The mat hangs like a padded barrier, shielding the door from the storm. Running your fingers along it, you feel its rough yet solid texture, layers of reeds and wool woven tightly, allowing only a whisper of wind through. Inside, people prepare extra pegs and wedges for the roof. A man climbs a ladder to inspect the thatch above the beams, using a long stick to tighten bindings. Each cord is placed with care. Snowflakes settle in his hair, melting instantly. Nearby, two builders debate snow on the roof. One says it insulates and retains heat, the other warns it may overload the structure. Their discussion mirrors ongoing research into longhouse construction. Snow can act as a warm blanket, but too much can collapse a roof. They compromise, maintain a moderate layer and use poles to remove excess during the storm. Children gather stones near the outer wall, giggling as they arrange them neatly. You notice their purpose. The stones absorb incoming cold winds, diffusing force before it reaches the timber, a clever tactic born of experience. Back inside, the longhouse grows warmer and busier. A woman spreads fresh straw across the entrance floor, absorbing melted snow and preventing icy patches. You kneel beside her, letting the straw fall through your fingers with a soft crackle. Near the hearth, two elders test airflow with a feather held near the vent. It barely sways. One taps it against his palm, remarking that storms reveal the skill of builders. The younger people nod, attentive. A man stacks firewood along the interior wall, arranging logs loosely for airflow. The wood carries the scent of resin and forest. An apprentice asks why they bring wood inside before the storm. Cold wood burns poorly, the man explains. Pre-warmed logs catch quickly when needed. You reach for one, feeling warmth seeping through its grain. Nearby, a mother inspects hanging herbs, shaking thyme and angelica gently. Loose leaves drift down. She explains that storms tighten the indoor air, making scents stronger. Herbs keep it clean and pleasant. She hands you a sprig of thyme, its aroma immediately soothing. Another group prepares water containers. Although snow is plentiful outside, melting it requires extra heat. They fill clay jars and place them near the hearth to stay above freezing. You lift one. It feels heavy but warm. A simple yet vital precaution. As the wind picks up, you help place thick woven mats along inner doors. These muffled sound and held warmth instantly, and you feel the difference when your hand presses against one. A young builder brings a bundle of long poles, explaining they will be used to knock snow off the roof if it becomes too heavy. He leans them near the entrance for quick access. You imagine stepping outside during the storm, snow swirling, using the poles to protect the roof. Preparations continue calmly and deliberately. People work with intent, without fear. Winter storms are simply a season to prepare for, another test of endurance. A grandmother calls children to show them how to check for drafts with a candle flame. They watch for flickers. When one child spots a leak, gentle applause fills the room. An older woman guides him to fill it with moss. You press it firmly, the flame steadies. Outside, The wind grows stronger, snow swirling past the doorway. The longhouse responds quietly, walls solid, roof secure. Inside, someone adds another log to the hearth, brightening the fire and casting long shadows. You sit near the warmth as the final preparations conclude. People wrap themselves in blankets, exchanging quiet words. Outside, the storm roars, but inside the home remains steady and warm. You feel the heat on your skin, smell the herbs, hear the fire's soft crackle. The longhouse stands reinforced, insulated, defended, a calm island awaiting the storm. Later, you wake to a deep, muffled silence, the kind that comes after a heavy snowstorm blankets the land. Stretching, the longhouse feels serene. The fire still glows softly. You move toward the entrance, pressing your hand against the hide curtain, absorbing the peaceful stillness. You wake to the soft creak of the roof settling beneath its blanket of snow, a deep, gentle sound, almost like a quiet sigh. Inside the longhouse, the air is warm, carrying the glow of dying embers, and the scent of wool, smoke, and herbs drifts like a familiar embrace. As you stretch and step from your sleeping platform, movement catches your eye near the entrance chamber. Two builders are fastening thick wool panels along the inner wall, adding the final touches for the day. These are not just decorations. They double as insulation, blending beauty with practicality. You join them as they unroll the first panel, a heavy woolen tapestry dyed in muted reds, browns, and soft greens. The firelight warms the colors, and when you brush your fingers across its dense weave, you notice swirling shapes, waves, and stylized animals flowing gracefully. A woman explains that these patterns are inspired by stories passed down through generations. She presses the tapestry against the wall to check its height, and you help steady the upper edge. The wool is thick enough to soften even the sharpest winter wind. As they secure it, the longhouse gains more than physical warmth. It acquires a kind of emotional heat, the kind that fills a space with identity. Scholars note that early Scandinavian textile hangings were often functional, not purely decorative. They acted as thermal barriers, catching heat and keeping drafts at bay. You see this clearly as the tapestry settles against the wall, like a blanket hugging the room. A young girl approaches, carrying a small carved wooden panel etched with interlocking knots that glimmer in the firelight. She hands it to her father, who smiles proudly. These carvings will be mounted along the ceiling beams. Looking up, you notice the subtle variations in the wood grain above. Adding the panels will enhance the aesthetic while preventing tiny drafts from slipping through. You lift the panel, surprised by its weight, and help him peg it securely into place. Nearby, another group works on the door curtain, replacing a plain hide with one decorated along its edges with dyed thread. Swirling lines of red and yellow brighten the thick fur. Hung across the entrance, it falls in soft folds, shimmering as the fire flickers. Pressing your hand against the decorated edge, you feel its dense, warm weight. Proof that beauty does not compromise function, it strengthens it. Children arrive with treasures from a chest, bone pendants, polished stones, and small carved figurines of animals and ships. Giggles fill the air as they place them on shelves near sleeping platforms. A grandmother instructs them to leave certain pieces near draft-prone corners. You raise an eyebrow, and she laughs, explaining that some families believe objects guard warmth, or at least provide something pleasant to gaze at during long winter days. You wander to the far wall, where a group of women hang narrow woven strips. Each bears a unique pattern, spirals, arrows, branching tree shapes, and small symbols that may carry stories whispered through generations. Hung vertically, the strips overlap slightly, trapping rising heat. You help align the bottom edge of one strip. It drops softly, adding another layer of warmth to the longhouse. A lively discussion begins near the central beam, where round wooden shields hang, painted in earthy tones with simple geometric designs. One man argues that shields help capture heat and reduce drafts along the upper walls. Another suggests their placement honors ancestors. Whatever the reason, their effect is clear. They absorb and reflect warmth back into the room. Touching a shield, you feel it cool at first, then gradually warming beneath your hand. At the hearth, a young woman etches designs into small clay tiles, intended to line the floor near the fire. One tile bears a swirling motif, its textured grooves catching your touch. Arranged around the hearth, they cast subtle shadows, adding understated beauty to the heart of the home. Elsewhere, a man hangs dried lavender near the sleeping areas. Its scent drifts clean and calming, easing long nights. A woman ties a cluster of dried orange peels near the entrance. Rare and imported, they release a sweet aroma that mingles with the warmth. These touches show that beauty matters during winter. It uplifts spirits when the world outside feels frozen and still. You help hang another tapestry near the bier. Soft, naturally colored wool resembles clouds and hills. Slightly thinner than the others, it adds color and familiarity. Animals on the opposite wall shift, their warmth rising. The tapestry absorbs it, creating another pocket of comfort. Moving through the longhouse, each addition deepens its character. Bare walls now hold texture and color. Beams shimmer with carved details. Hearth tiles glow subtly. Entrance areas carry softness. Sleeping nooks feel cradled by layers of woven warmth. Even shadows seem gentler. Someone hums softly while working, a simple melody that others quietly join. Not a formal song, but a shared rhythm. The longhouse warmth grows in harmony, showing that decorative touches enrich more than the eye, they nourish the spirit. In a world of long winters and endless nights, small comforts are powerful. You sit near the hearth, gazing across the room. Carved animals guard the beams. Woven strips flutter lightly. Tapestries soften the walls. Herbal bundles sway gently. The space feels lived in, human, warm. The longhouse has become more than a shelter against winter. It is beautiful. Watching the final piece settle, a quiet truth warms your chest. A warm home shelters the body, but a beautiful one shelters the soul. You wake before dawn, the longhouse dim and quiet, wrapped in its warmth. The air carries the faint remnants of last night's fire. A gentle glow pulses from the hearth's embers. You rise slowly, your breath visible in the cool air above your sleeping platform. Today is not a workday. Today is the quiet culmination of months of effort. The longhouse stands complete, warm from floor to roof, ready to guard its people through the deepest winter nights. Moving toward the center, the soft creak of wooden floors reminds you how far the house has come, from a simple frame to a full home, alive with warmth and care. Now the longhouse hums with gentle life. Tapestries line the walls, each one a story woven into fabric. Lamps sit in their holders, amber pools waiting to glow. Sleeping nooks shine softly behind drawn curtains. Furs and wool blankets are stacked neatly. Every corner feels lived in, cared for, warmed by human presence. One by one, the Vikings begin to rise. A mother stretches beneath her fur blankets, gathering her children for the morning meal. An elder sits quietly near the hearth, rubbing his hands to welcome the new day. Two young apprentices hurry to stir the embers, coaxing them back to flame with practiced ease. Birch bark curls, kindling snaps, and warmth rises in a gentle whoosh. As the fire brightens the hall, the longhouse reveals itself fully. You walk slowly past each beam, each woven strip, each carved detail. You remember when the walls were bare and cold. Now they trap the fire's heat, locking it inside like a secret. Your hand rests on the wood. It feels warm, almost alive. A man begins preparing breakfast, stirring oats and dried berries in a pot over the growing flames. The scent spreads through the hall. Children gather nearby, rubbing their eyes and murmuring sleepy greetings. A few neighbors slip in from their own homes, stamping snow from their boots. They carry baskets of bread and smoked fish, sharing what they prepared during the night. Soft conversation fills the air. You pause near the entrance, observing the layered doors at work. Cold air lingers in the small chamber between the doors, but it does not reach you. The inner curtain sways gently, keeping warmth where it belongs. You pull it aside and step into the entry chamber. The difference is immediate. Cold, sharp winter air meets you. You push open the outer door and step outside. Snow blankets the world, nearly reaching the doorframe, sparkling under pale morning light. The storm has passed, leaving a silent, pristine landscape. Looking back at the longhouse, its thick roof holds a smooth layer of snow, insulating the warmth below. The walls stand strong, sod at the base frozen into a protective shell. Smoke curls from the roof vent in a thin, steady line. You brush snow from a post and circle the longhouse, noting the careful reinforcements before the storm. Straw bundles remain wedged at corners. Mud chinking shows no cracks, no gaps. No wind has breached the walls. A quiet pride settles over you, as if you helped build this home from the first branch. Stepping inside, warmth immediately surrounds you. Hot stones near the entrance radiate heat, easing the transition from the frozen outdoors. You sit by the hearth and watch the Vikings prepare for the day. Despite winter's grip, life thrives here. A grandmother begins a story, her voice low and rhythmic, about an ancient winter colder than any remembered, when even the stars seemed to freeze. She tells how the people survived by building wisely, using land, wind, and each other to shape warmth. Her words echo everything you have witnessed: clever insulation, shared labor, constant care woven into every beam and blanket. A young boy asks why the longhouse stays warm even when the world outside feels frozen. She smiles, spreading her hands. She mentions thick sod walls, double timber layers, heated stones beneath the floor, and the warmth of animals beyond the partition. Then, leaning close, she lowers her voice. The most important source of warmth is the people inside. Their breath, movement, laughter, and togetherness. You feel the truth of her words settle like another layer of heat. As the day unfolds, the longhouse becomes a hub of quiet activity. Someone fetches snow to melt for water. Another repairs a leather strap. Children chase each other around sleeping platforms, laughter bright as sunlight. Women begin dyeing wool with dried plants saved from summer, adding faint, comforting scents. Men sharpen tools, smoothing edges with steady hands. You realize you are witnessing more than survival. This is a rhythm of life, thriving even in the harshest season. The longhouse is more than shelter. It is a living world, shaped by attention, care, and shared spirit. Evening settles, and lamps are lit one by one. Warm pools of golden light bloom around the room. The fire glows deep red, flames casting shadows across the rafters. The longhouse breathes calmly, full of life. Vikings gather around the hearth for the last meal of the day. Stew simmers gently, bread passes hand to hand. Children curl beneath furs, rosy-cheeked. Conversation drifts in soothing tones. You look around, sensing something gentle and steady, a sense of belonging. The longhouse endures across centuries, not just as structure, but as a story of warmth shaped by human hands. Tonight, snow settles softly outside, while the home glows within, a refuge carved into winter's heart. Now the longhouse quiets. The fire softens into a slow, steady ember. Warmth lingers, calm and comforting. You settle, letting your breath slow as shadows stretch across the wooden floor. Outside, the winter world lies still beneath a white blanket. Sounds are softened, movements slowed, as if the landscape exhales in perfect silence. You shift slightly, feeling heat radiating through the furs beside you, wrapping around your shoulders like a gentle embrace. The longhouse no longer feels like timber and earth. It feels like a resting heartbeat, steady, protective, holding you in rhythm. Lamps flicker, casting shapes that drift like dreams. Your eyes roam over carved beams overhead, patterns blending into shadows as your thoughts slow. Warmth holds patiently, never rushing, never fading. Outside, snow falls slowly, piling against the house, thickening the quiet cocoon that shelters everyone inside. You take one last slow breath. The air feels warm in your chest, peaceful, coaxing your thoughts to loosen, your body to grow heavier. Comfort settles over you like a blanket. Eyelids soften, breath deepens. The longhouse grows quieter still. You drift into rest,